has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
I imagine right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No. Because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagman and Hagman Report for today. It is Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Hagman and Hagman Report here in beautiful Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm Doug Hagman, at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, most importantly my son Joe Hagman. Together, we are the Hagman and Hagman Report, what I like to call America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. And it's our job to bring you the news that propels the headlines, of course. As we say, the news that's shaped and convoluted and hidden amid a funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival that we call the corporate media. We do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. Now, again, thank you for all of the new and veteran listeners for checking in with us. Thank you for tuning in to us. And we really appreciate your support, your prayers, and everything that goes along with that. For new listeners, just want to remind everyone, 8 to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. That's our broadcast time. Our home base on the Internet is hagmanandhagman.com. And, folks, while you're at it, please check out our new YouTube channel. Please go to hagmanandhagman.com and click on the link to the new YouTube channel. JD has just been doing a fantastic job. There you can find visuals as well as audios of our previous shows, and it's he's done a fantastic job, and we thank him for that. Again, hagmanandhagman.com, click on the link to the YouTube channel. Tonight we've got a great show. Steve Quayle coming up with Ross Powell, first hour. Timothy Alberino, hours number 2 and 3. It's just a tremendous show, folks. Buckle up, make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright and locked position, because your world's going to get rocked tonight. Joe, welcome.
It is great to be here. Really looking forward to tonight's show. We have both Mr. Ross Powell and Steve Quayle on the line with us. Ross Powell's website is survival401k.com. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having us both on, Doug. I think it'll be an interesting show. We're covering the one world global coming currency, the one world global coming king, upheaval in the Catholic Church, and financial markets that are absolutely sending everybody into a tizzy. So I'm going to bring Ross on for the first hour, because obviously he's been in banking the majority of his life. He's got a great handle on this stuff. So with no further ado, Ross, let's just talk about the secret economic war with China ahead of the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights decision. Take it away, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Steve and Doug. And Doug, thank you for having me. Yes, that's many of the things people have seen, all the turmoil in the Chinese markets, and they've lost like 30% of their value, closer to $2 trillion last week. And then suddenly after that happened, the New York Stock Exchange went offline for 4 hours, which is unprecedented. And it turns out that there's a secret war going on. So essentially it's a tit-for-tat type of war of attrition between both countries, and nobody sees about it in the state-controlled press. Mainstream media won't talk about it, but essentially there's an economic war going on. And it's all driven by China's want to be part of the special drawing rights within the IMF, which will raise them to parity with our dollar, essentially, and make them another world currency that can be traded in, and will diminish the U.S. dollar, and consequently will cause our dollar to be devalued and inflation and all the things that go with that. So with these strikes on the Chinese market, where they had to prop it up, and they've ceased allowing people to sell their stocks on the Chinese market for 6 months. I mean, there was a lost value of closer to $2 trillion. Some of that's been made back up, but again, it's still all just paper money. And at the same time, once we did that, hackers came in and brought down our New York Stock Exchange, or the other. I have a really good contact that thought it was more along the lines of, they got in and were starting some sell orders, and ours in the stock exchange was tanking quickly and moving towards minus 300, and they just pulled the plug and called it a glitch, but in fact it was some form of cybersecurity or cyber attack that broke through the walls. Because that, along with United Airlines, the Wall Street Journal, and a litany of other companies that are all part of different infrastructures of the country, it was almost like a depth sounding by the Chinese to say, look, you can try, but we are still here. And so they brought the stock exchange down. They messed with United Airlines, one of their biggest airlines across the country, the biggest financial newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, and others. And then the banks at the same time were all getting hammered with cyber attacks as well, denials of service and things like that from my sources at one of the major banks. So all of that being said, that's just sort of like the background of what's going on. And what's driving all of this, and what your listeners need to be aware of, is back in April and May, we've talked on this show about the special drawing rights and what that means. And in May, as expected, the IMF said that the Chinese have met the threshold in order to be considered, and Britain came on board, and a lot of the partners in NATO all said that, yeah, China should be on board. They all joined the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which is a huge coup for them as well. So what that means is that it's pretty much fait accompli that Chinese will be, in October, are going to be approved to be part of that basket of currencies. So that's where America is trying to destroy the credibility of China with their markets tanking and having to shore it up. And there's lots of stories in the mainstream media about the Chinese being a high risk again. It's not what you think it is. And so all of this information is coming about in order to discredit the Chinese and try to influence the vote in the IMF. In the past, America had a majority vote, essentially. Now they don't. So they're having to shore up whatever alliances they can put together, and people are looking at who's money talks, and everybody else knows what walks. And so America is trying to cobble together a coalition of the willing to stop the Chinese, and I don't think they're going to get there. So it's anticipated that the Chinese will become an SDR basket, a currency within the basket, and by doing so, that's going to change the financial landscape considerably, and it could affect our trade balances, the value of the dollar. All the Forex currencies, all the Forex markets, all of that stuff could be impacted or will be impacted. There's no doubt about that. So what your listeners need to know is they need to expect to see more headlines of market crashing, things coming to a stop. You're going to see hits, essentially launching economic missiles in the background stealthily, and they'll just wake up one morning and boom, there's another hit and they're taken. And there's really nothing we can do, if you're in the market, can do about that. You're going to get impacted. So, and the final thing about that, and I want to caution everybody about, is all wars are caused by money. If you think about every war that's happened, it's generally about economics, whether it's the Revolutionary War, which was tariffs. The Civil War started with tariffs and slavery as well, but also World War I, World War II. Vietnam was about communism, aggression, and other things as well. And so all wars are caused by money, and if there's such a huge change of the world order by bringing China and making it parity with the United States or close to it, that could break out into a shooting war as well. And we've seen some of that, Stephen. I know you've talked about previously about that. So from China's perspective, there's a lot going on, and much of it you don't even see in the press.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to deal with is the fact that with the Pope coming to the United States and his disdain for the global system, how do you see that playing in, Ross? Because basically, on one hand, we've got China becoming the powerhouse of Southeast Asia, and the day they announce their true gold holdings, everything changes forever. Meanwhile, you've got the systematic destruction of U.S. dollar as detailed to Kyle Bass by one of the economists / mouthpieces for Obama multiple years ago in the press and announcing they're going to destroy the dollar. Meanwhile, we have the Pope accepting Morales' hammer and sickle crucifix, and I think that it's interesting because most people don't understand what that really means. That means the triumph of communism over Christianity. the papal mouthpieces said they had. Now, I want to make something clear. This is not Catholic bashing. This is the image bashing that is going on to basically pit traditional Catholics against the, I would say this, the replacement theology Catholics who are believing that social justice is the highest calling versus personal salvation and conversion to Jesus Christ. Now, saying that, this is what my question to you is, Ross. The bottom line is all wars are bankers' wars. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. The control of money is the control of all evil. From the Bolshevik Revolution and Wall Street's financing of Trotsky, from the financing of terrorism, all terrorism is financial, i.e., how does ISIS go from a small group to a billion-dollar organization in less than 1 year? Well, they get by with a little help from their friends. How does it happen that we've got now the Pope coming to America and the cry for a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a one-world economy? Because I think this is what the crisis point is. Here's what people have got to understand. The system will no longer support them. The plans of early retirement, the plans of a guaranteed income, all that's going down the drain on an out-of-control train. That's what I was going for. So please, explain to the people what it is, the bigger picture, and why it is so much a necessity to get in control of their own hands what they've worked for. I mean, we're talking about lives being wiped out in cyber attack. We're talking about every database in the world, from federal databases to tax databases to you name it. If you're in a database, your records are known and on the open market. So saying all that, it's the perfect storm for the globalists to come in and set up a worldwide control mechanism, is it not?
Well, right. I mean, order out of chaos, and that's their slogan. So that if you create enough chaos in the financial markets and the geopolitical markets or realms, and then also in people's personal lives, people will give their freedom away for security. And so, if you look at the Chinese model today for economics, it's centrally controlled by the government, but they do have a lot of free market things involved that's raised a middle class and raised some really wealthy people. But again, it's becoming everything is an oligarchy. On the 4th of July, I actually celebrated Happy Oligarchy Day because that's where we're turning to. So at the end of the day, you're going to get a centrally controlled socialist mechanism that with the power is going to be controlled by a very small cadre of people who think they're smarter than everybody else, and you are simply a serf, and you're going to get back to an oligarchical style of world leadership. And so everything will be planned for you. And so when the Pope in his speeches and what his belief in, he's definitely a Marxist. He's made no bones about that when he was in Argentina, and so there's no issue with that. So he's actually into this social justice and redistribution of wealth, and take it or leave it. That's where we're headed. And so you have a lot of folks that are whether it's Catholics or Muslims, they're all sort of leading in that direction. So you as an individual need to protect yourself. And again, if all wars are caused by bankers and money, you need to find a way to beat the system. And I think we have a way to do that for you, which we'll describe later in the show. But that's where we're going. So you're going to have to take personal control of your assets, put it in something that's tangible. And I talked to several people today that are just focusing on the basics of water, food, family, shelter, God, all those things. There's, your five-legged stool, really. And so everybody listening to this broadcast needs to recognize that they're on their own. I would recommend people work out what that's called a mutual assistance groups, things that you have like-minded folks that will take care of each other, families that work with their neighbors, and find people that you can get along with and you can work with to help each other, because no person can stand alone. You can't be alone. One man is not an island. So you have to be with others and fellow believers and pull together and forget about the race baiting and all of the things that are trying to divide us, and focus on the one thing that brings us together is your faith and your principles. So that's where we're headed. And to your point, Steve, they're dividing us and they're moving us in a direction that I don't think we all think we're going to be there, but we're going to wake up one morning and there we are. Did that answer your question?
Yep, it does. But I think one of the things that's easy said than done, is that we are at the point of where people don't understand the true nature of the times we live in. And I apologize, there's no way for me to shut my phone off, Doug, Joe, and everyone, from someone calling in. The point that I think is critical to see this, that when you generate the confusion, when you generate the problem, whether the Hegelian dialectic ever was truly understood by the United States, I truly doubt it. But the point is, the problems of the world are being generated. Therefore, the solutions of the world will be the ones provided by the Illuminati and the elitists. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't understand modern Christendom and the faith of the fathers and the entire situation that God has been working on and working through in our lives to bring us to this point, is basically under attack. I don't know if you saw it, Ross. This is all economic. You know, I think it was R.E. McMaster that said all warfare is economic. And the thing is that it's critical for people to understand that we are now in a time unlike any other in history. And I'll say this, Jesus laid it out very simply what the time would be like. So now what am I making these statements for? First and foremost, I'm making the statement that we are in a global meltdown that's orchestrated. I think the quote was, James, I want to read this to everybody. Now, this is said in 1950, so let's just put it into perspective. 65 years ago, Warburg confidently, I'm reading this, declared to the United States Senate, "We shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent. Well, let me share this with you. They're not making an either or. They're making it a both statement. First of all, conquest is underway. All wars are financial. The bankers obviously make a lot of money backing both sides of the equation. So now let's get into the EU and the Greek issue, okay? Because some can say it's all Greek to me, but that no longer holds validity, as it's all in the cards for Europe, Western Europe, to fall. It is in the cards, so to speak, and literally somebody said, are you talking about the Illuminati deck cards? Well, hey, that applies now more than ever. But no, I'm talking about the saying that we are now up against, I would say, external, internal, and I'll use the word supernatural forces that are all coming together in a nexus to bring about the New World Order, which basically means down with everything. That means national identity, national currency. It means specifically the religion of Christianity. There's nothing more the Illuminati, the globalist, elitist hate is more than Jesus Christ. Jesus absolutely established the individual's identity for the glory of God, and also granted each man and woman and those who would call upon his name the opportunity to basically escape the present world that literally is ruled by lust. Again, the love of money, and we'll get to other stuff later in the show on hours 2 and 3. But let's talk now. I want you to address Greece and the ECB coup and all of the bad blood, the bad terms, and how this is going to play out.
Sure, and that's a great depiction of what we have going for us in the future, is that you have misdirection and you think that you have your vote counts and you have a referendum, and the Greeks had a referendum thinking, well, and their prime minister basically said, if you vote no, we're going to get better terms. So they voted no, and there's huge celebration in the streets of Athens and around all of the various islands of Greece. And suddenly, when they voted no, now they go back to the bankers in Germany and the ECB, and now they have a terrible deal. They had them over the barrel. I mean, they were about to draw and quarter their leader, and he took a worse deal than what they had that they voted no against, or no for. So now you vote no, you think you're controlling your destiny, and lo and behold, you wake up the next day or a week later, and here you are, you've got a worse situation where the ECB and the government controls 25% of the economy. Folks can't get into the banks are closed, the folks can't get in to get their money, but they can't get to their safety deposit boxes, where many people have their gold and silver stored, which is a bad idea always, and most banks won't let you do it anymore, but you don't want to do that anyway because you still can't get to it. And so there was a major coup. So it was almost like it was both sides were owned by the same people, so that there was a self-fulfilling prophecy. No, we don't want this, and the government pushed it, and then suddenly that no vote got them a worse situation where there's austerity and capital controls and all the stuff that's going to be hammering them for years and years to come. And so that needs to be a lesson for all of us, that you recognize that the bankers play both sides of it, or the major money players play both sides of the equation. Just like, and many people may not like this, what I'm going to say here, but just like Democrats and Republicans, and you're looking at the people that you voted into power to change some of the stuff or change some of the leftist ideals that are getting pushed through, and then you have your leadership in both the Senate and the House capitulate to the president, and you wait a minute, I didn't vote for that. So that's the same kind of thing the Greeks got. I didn't want that. I wanted something better, but you're not. It's controlled by one central power, and so that's what's happening. So there's an old saying. I have a good friend of mine who's Greek, and he was telling me, we were talking about this, I don't know, last week when it was all in the throes of it, and he said the big saying in Greece is only cooks and the stupid work. So they have a mindset in Greece where working is not the preferred method of living. So you have a lot of people on the dole. So at that point they ran out of money, other people's money to spend. So that's where they had to go. And there's 60 euros a day was the limit, and the cost of living there is not cheap. So that doesn't go very far. So when you can't get to your cash, you can't get to your metals, you only have a limited amount of resources that you can get to, you're going to start thinking, okay, well, I'll just take the deal that comes to me. I'd rather not starve to death. I'll just take the deal. We'll get past it, and the deal gets extended, and another deal happens, and another deal happens. So the one thing the shoe that hasn't dropped yet in Greece is the haircut piece of this whole equation. So it's not going to happen today, and it may not happen tomorrow, but in the next 60 days, you can be guaranteed that the folks that are in Greece are going to wake up and find out, they just took a 20 to 30% haircut on their deposits to pay the bills of the government or to reach the terms of the ECB. And just like they did in Cyprus, and then they did that also in Iceland. So folks are getting haircuts, and who's to say that we can't do that? Even people's money in money market accounts here in the United States, that par value of your money market account, the dollar for dollar, which you think is legitimate and it doesn't change, is not guaranteed. You could wake up tomorrow and have 80 cents on the dollar and say, oh well, too bad, so sad. So folks need to recognize that if it's money, if you have your money in a brokerage account and you're in a money market thinking I'm all in cash, I'm okay, you're not okay. They could still give you a haircut really quickly, and there's nothing you can do about it because you signed the contract. It's not guaranteed. All money is at risk in a brokerage account. So the folks in Greece learned the trick, that the misdirection that they felt because of the hubris of the government thinking I'm going to make a bigger deal, a better deal, when in fact both parties are working on the same team for all practical purposes, and you got great drama and great showbiz. But at the end of the day, it's the people that got hosed, and we're not far behind them. So Greece is a great analogy for what we're going to be doing in the future. Is that so? That, Steve, is where the tangible assets are important for your listeners.
I think, Doug, you probably saw, and Joe, I hope you saw, and Ross, the fact is that, again, it's important to understand when banks close, safety deposit boxes are inaccessible. If you can't touch it, if you cannot touch it, you don't own it. If you can't hold it in your hand, someone else will hold it in your hand. I want to explain something to you, Ross, and we'll get into this too. That happened today. I can't tell you how many of my listeners, and I'll just use her first name, nobody knows where she's at, but Kim is representative of people listening to us tonight that basically went to her broker/financial planner, wanted to pull money out to get something in her hand. He talked her out of it. Do you see by the feedback you get, and hear and see by the feedback you get, the complete now disdain for people that want to control their own funds? Have you seen it pick up?
You're a pariah. You're a pariah.
Okay.
I mean, your overreaction. You're an extremist. The market moves. They'll give you the whole adage. It moves up and down over the course of the year of tens of years, and it'll always come back because they make money on you. They don't want you to give your money up. And when I talk to customers about all of this, I tell them expect to get huge pushback from your financial advisor, or they even want to do business with you. I've had numerous customers say that my accountant or my financial advisor is belittling me, is being rude to me. Doesn't actually want to serve as my advisor any longer. And I have numerous customers that's been some as close as Austin that they did that, and they just got ridiculed, and people being rude when they're the financial advisor is being paid by my customer to manage their money, and they're treating them like they're stepchildren, and it's not right. So they're getting huge disdain, and they're going to try to marginalize your opinion, marginalize your sources, and all this kind of stuff. And so you're going to be put on the fringe and the extreme. But at the end of the day, you're going to be eating, and everybody else is going to be standing in the FEMA camp or standing in a bread line waiting to get their 3 cups of soup and a gallon of water. So you just have to plod through it and have the wherewithal to work this and beat the bankers at their own game, because what they're trying to do is get you to second guess yourself, thinking that you're not as smart as they are, and you know in your heart, and you know through your prayer life, and you know through other things in your life that you know what is right, and you just have to plod ahead, take the hits, take the beatings, whatever they want to do, but know that you are right. And so to your point, Steve, it's an all-out war against from the people that control the money to the people that want their money. There's a huge battle going on, and so it's going to beat them. You're going to have to stay the course.
Well, I think, too, that people need to understand a plan. Number one, I would recommend to people who are getting flack at this moment or want to move out that the minute they hear, well, you're stupid. And by the way, any broker, any financial planner that belittles you for wanting control of your money and absolutely berates you is not worthy. And you can file a complaint with the headquarters of whatever brokerage firm. And if they won't flat out give your money, I'd say at least a half a dozen to a dozen of my clients have had to basically threaten the financial institution. These are the biggest brokerage houses in the world. Go to the Attorney General and file a complaint. So that's number one. Number two, when someone asks you a question, what do you want your money for? Say you want to buy property out of state. Property, even precious metals. Somebody says, well, I don't want to lie. It's not lying. Real property. Property is that which you own. And that's an answer that should suffice to them. Or another good, and I'm giving people tactical feedback of how they can respond, because I'm tired and I'm tired of my clients, your clients, Doug, your listeners, our listeners, getting beat up by these guys. Ross, explain to the average person listening all over the world that when they put money into a brokerage firm, put it in with an investment counselor or financial planner, explain how that money is used, even though they may think they have 100 shares of Apple or 1,000 shares of Google, whatever it is. Explain how the brokerage firms make money. Do you know this? I would say 1 in 100 people don't understand. No, one in a million don't understand.
So the way the brokerage firms work, they pull your money and you buy stocks and you buy bonds and you buy mutual funds and stuff, and you have these things in your name, but the money is pooled, and there's things called sweep accounts. The money moves back and forth, and so all the money that you have that's sitting in, say, for instance, a lot of my customers have moved out of the market, and people I talk to, whether it's a church or it's in the neighborhoods, they've moved out of the market and they put it in their money market account. It's like cash. It's like my consumer account, my DDA at my local bank. But in reality, it's not. All that money is sitting there. You have it in a ledger, and it's digitally there when you log into your account at Fidelity or T. Rowe Price or a litany of others, and you see your balance. It's $150,000. Great. But every night, that money is swept out, and that's used, and it's loaned, and it's moved around, and it's being used as derivatives. So there's all kinds of third-party credit risks and all kinds of things that it's essentially a casino that all these people are betting with your money. And so they sweep this money into this account and then they move it back and forth, and so it's all done with the computers, and everything is still looks the same. But at the end of the day, if one of your brokerage houses takes a huge hit, Lehman Brothers third-party risk on derivatives got called out, that's what collapsed them, and that's where their money went. And so then you have a big bank like J.P. Morgan Chase come in, or where they took over WAMU. These are financial coups, many times handled by insiders within the government. If you've noticed, every Treasury Secretary in memory has all been a president or the CEO or some major player within Goldman Sachs. So if everybody that's in the Treasury Department at the head of it has come from those brokerage firms, you know that when they get out, it's all embedded, and all during the time, it's completely infiltrated with all the knowledge, and so those people are making the money. It's controlled. It's manipulated. So your brokerage accounts, and you can make money at it. I'm not going to disagree. And what we offer is tangible assets, and you have flexibility to do that through our Solo K and our checkbook IRA that we offer. But it's important that you understand that you need to get your basic needs met at the minimum, along with making money at the same time. So you understanding, and this is probably a long-winded answer, Steve, and I apologize, but it's so involved that it's so complicated that it's hard to explain it all, what everybody's doing. There's so many moving parts and so many different divisions of an organization that your money is not what you see, those digits on your screen. It's not really there. It's all moving around, and they have you as credited for that. But at any time, your money market, as I mentioned earlier, can be devalued overnight, and suddenly you have, instead of $1, you have 80 cents or 75 cents or 60 cents. So that's what everybody needs to recognize, that your money is there, but it's not there at the same time. I don't know if that's long-winded and got to the answer.
No, that's an important answer, because I just think, and Doug, you can obviously speak to this, most people, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but most people don't understand what happens when they go on a financial statement, if they're online, and see they've got XYZ in their account, they've got this many shares of that. Did you know in clarity what Ross just explained?
No, not at all. And that's a good point, Steve. Just briefly here, from what I understand, it's like one big swimming pool. Everyone throws their money in. The head of that swimming pool, the owner of that pool, does whatever they want to do, or he or she wants to do with your money to make money off of the money that is sitting in your account, basically, which is really not in your account. It's in the swimming pool, and it's being tossed around and moved around. And then when you go for it, you better, you hope it's there, but it may not be, because it might be out in the tide somewhere, I suppose, for a kind of a word.
Well, right, that's
or they make a bad bet, and something like that, and so that pool shrinks by 30,000 gallons, and suddenly they have to make it up, and the equity, even though you have your 100 shares of Apple because they bought them from Apple, and they bought them on the open market, they're sitting there, but the value is somewhere else. So the days of having your stock certificates, there's movies where you see people open up a box and there's a stock certificate for 100 shares of AT&T, and now it's worth $50,000, and you just hit the lottery. It doesn't exist. Like very few people ever get a stock certificate in their hands. It's all everything is held at the brokerage firm. So you don't really own it. It's sitting there in your account, but that could easily be swept away or lost. Or if you like Corn did, suddenly their whole organization goes belly up, and you got nothing. So there's three things we should talk about with this, and the Greeks would be glad to tell you. You need wealth preservation, you need a growth engine in your portfolio, and you need liquidity. And those three legs of the stool are the most important part. So you've got to find a way to make sure that it has intrinsic value, which it could be property, precious metals, rental properties, things like that. You need to have a growth engine, which could be, you could have some stocks if you want to, but rental properties or other things that appreciate that you can turn it over. And then your liquidity, something that you could get your hands on, cash that you could sell immediately or barter with in the event of a catastrophe. So those are the kind of things that we need to talk about, Stephen, and move us into what the civil market's doing and other things. But what we can segue into this is what's happening now with there huge cyber attacks going on in the nation every day. I mean, I talked to my contact. What day was it? Monday. I had lunch with a good friend of mine who's an IT director, and he's just saying they're just getting hammered every day in and day out. It pops up on the weekends, on Friday afternoon at 2:00, it's almost like clockwork. There's a rush of denial of service attempts. It goes through the weekend because they know it's short-staffed. It abates Sunday evening, and it pops up again on Monday, Tuesday. So they're constantly getting hit. And so you need to recognize that somebody's trying to get at your money. Some of them do it legally, and some people are doing it illegally through cyber attacks and trying to break into the codes and getting at your money and stealing your money. But they also fish with your cell phone. They'll send you emails, all these kind of things to get at your money. And some of them, they do it legally through the brokerage firms, and others do it illegally through what I would call terrorist acts of cyber attacks. So everybody just needs to be due diligent on their accounts and managing their money, and getting things where you're going to have if the whole balloon goes up, that you have the ability to have wealth preservation, and you can feed your family, you can shelter them, and you can give them water, and you can protect them. So all of those things are very important, and when you're in an oligarchical situation or worldview where just the very few people control everything, then all you have left is you, God, yourself, your family, and your neighbors, and that's what everybody needs to build those relationships, and get out of Facebook and get in FaceTime, meaning getting in somebody's face, meet them, meet your neighbors, build a community, get to know everybody, and actually live your life, because it's not everything is what you think it might be. I kind of went long on that, but that's
well. Yeah,
really
here, let me make just a really quick statement that people need to understand. The greatest change in terminology. If people don't think words have meaning, after the first year, people moved. Any bank depositor moved from basically a secured a secured depositor to a non-secured lender. Explain why that's huge, Ross. Then we're going to jump into the silver market, because silver is one of the most reflective elements in the world. So the silver market is reflecting the absolute failure of the paper markets. We'll deal with why paper silver is sold, yet physical silver is acquired by the people that are ultimately driving the silver prices down. But explain why it's important. Explain the difference, if you would, between a secured depositor and an unsecured lender, because everybody who puts money in the bank now is an unsecured lender.
Right. I mean, it's the Dodd-Frank Act that changed all of that. And yeah, you used to be a depositor. The DDA is what your checking account is. It's called a demand deposit account, and that means that you demand your deposits. I want my money, so I stroke a check or I use my debit card. That's a demand deposit account. It used to be that that was your money, and if something happened, the government would come in and cover you. Now, with the Dodd-Frank Act, and they protected the banks, they called it reform, but it's the only people that got reformed are you, that you actually went from a demand depositor to an unsecured debtor, meaning that your money is now owned by the bank, and so you're basically lending the money. When you put your paycheck or your direct deposit goes into your checking account, you just lent that bank your $3,000 or your $1,000 or your $500, depending on your paycheck. You lent that money to the bank, and they promise to give it to you when you spend it, but you lent it to them so that they can go out and play this derivative game, and there are casino bets that they make money, and that comes across to their stockholders, where their overall profits, like J.P. Morgan Chase announced today, they had record profits, and so they did that by laying off people and reducing their service, lowering the number of people that are actually in the bank to service you, going to a lot of self-service things. So they made a lot of money, and they did it also through the markets and through their brokerage income, which was down because of all the fines that they've had to deal with. But they still made a lot of money, and they did that by using your money overnight or sweeping it back and forth into these accounts. And so that pool of money that Doug mentioned, the swimming pool of money, ebbs and flows, and so the money is there for you to use your debit card or to write a check to your grocery store or for your car payment or whatever. But all of that money is there, but they're using it to make money on top of it. So they loan that money out overnight, or they they may make investments with it, or they make bets with it in the derivative markets, and so they think that they have it cornered and they're going to make a ton of money. So to that effect, somebody on the 7th of July this last 7/7/15, some major bank, and I think I know who it is, but I'm not going to call them out here, bought $1 billion of physical silver, which cleaned the men out, which cleaned out all the distributors. They bought $1 billion worth of physical silver. Either they did it to drive the price down, or there was a squeeze and a short covering that they had to cover their butts on a bet that they made. Somebody bought all that physical silver and moved it into somewhere else, or they distributed it to somebody else. That dried up the silver market. You can't find an American Eagle anywhere unless you pay a huge premium. And Steve, you can talk to this more than I can. But
right. Well, let me just address that now. Hey, Ross, let me address that
yes.
now because, I'm intimately aware of that market 18 hours a day at least. And right now, Silver Eagles from the mint are being held back up to maybe 3 or 4 weeks. The only way to buy them is on the secondary market. The mint raised their premium now, and we're told that at a dealer level it may go to anywhere from $3.50 to $4 over spot to buy them, which puts them at $19-20. And then obviously most dealers want to make $2 an ounce, on the Silver Eagles because they're in so much demand. Well, here's the thing. Years ago, and I've been on talk radio for 25 years, I don't know how long, but a long time, I think 24 years as a guest, 21 years as a host, somewhere around there. And the point that's relevant is this. We're seeing the physical acquisition price absolutely exceed the official spot price because people are getting out. I run a column by a guy named Steve that writes some of the best silver articles, and he's writing on the gold. Let me just share this. People now get it, but unfortunately they haven't got it. So I want to tell all you who bought high-priced metals that are bemoaning the fact that you got them higher than it is now, be patient. It will pay off. Historically, Ross, silver and gold trade 16-1 to 17-1. Last time gold hit 850 to 900. The last time silver hit 50, it got up as high as almost 14-1, or as low as 14-1. So meaning that the gold price, it takes right now almost 70 times the amount. You'll get 70 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold. Saying all that, the markets are only going to become more difficult. Fortunately, and I'm sorry, but it's true, I'm not making apologies. I still have silver, but people think that they can buy it at spot. Let me make it easy. People cannot buy silver at spot. If I, as a dealer, cannot buy it at spot, and I have to go out in the secondary market, which, by the way, most dealers who are filling orders within a week or two is, we have to buy it in a secondary market. Let me give you an example. I called a friend of mine who's a big silver dealer in another part of the country and said, I need 5,000 ounces of silver. Can I get it? And he said, yeah, you can get it. What are you willing to pay? I said, my client wants it. What do I have to pay? He said, this is what you got to pay. I said, I'll take it. Because now what's happening, and this is what I want to tell people, the people with money who get it, they don't care what they have to spend to get it, because guess what? It's very difficult to get. Everybody knows, and Ross, let's face it, we all know the three initials that dried up the silver market, that drove up the, this demand where there is none, even the same people that are manipulating and keeping it at 15 and a half, okay? Those people
right.
own 95% of all commodity contracts. Ladies and gentlemen, would they decide to let the price rise? If they have, let's say, $500 billion, well, it's more than that. Let's say they have $1 trillion in notational value, they can turn that notational value to probably at least $5 trillion immediately by just allowing
with the 10-to-1
yep.
Leverage that
exactly.
they typically use.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve.
Well, the point that we're trying to make
sorry.
Do you want to talk or you want me to talk? I'll shut up. You talk, and then I'll talk, because we can't both talk, and there's a delay, so please go ahead and talk.
Sure. I was going to say it's just important that it's the law of supply and demand. If you want tickets to a specific concert and you couldn't get them, If somebody has them, they're going to charge you more money. Again, tickets to the Super Bowl cost a lot of money. Tickets to special concerts cost a lot of money. If the ability to get something is constrained, whether it's artificially constrained or it's physically constrained by people just hoarding it, then you're going to pay more money. It applies to silver, it applies to steak, it applies to butter, it applies to potatoes. All of that is the law of supply and demand. So if you want it, you need to take physical possession of it today. Don't worry about the price, because the price will catch up with it. So that's all I wanted to say, Steve, is that we need to recognize that, I should only pay $2 over spot, or he's $2.23 or he's $2.22. Don't worry about all. If you can get a hold of it and store it away at your home, you need to take care of it right now, because there's going to be a time when you're not going to be able to find it anywhere. That's all I wanted to say, and I'll let you speak.
Yep. And then we're going to go into, let's talk about the services that you have. You left the world of banking. You basically are helping people to get stuff in their own hand without the tax hit, without the penalty. And here's what we're trying to say, ladies and gentlemen. Time truly is running out. I expect everything to change drastically, almost overnight, after the Pope comes and gives his presentation to the United Nations and Congress. It has to be obvious that there's an unseen hand. It has to be obvious that the bankers created illusory currency or units of trade. I get into the fight, Ross, and we're going to go straight into 401k survival plans, but I get into the fight all the time. People want to pick fights, and they do on email or on phone calls. Your gold and silver will rot in the streets. Not until the day of the Lord, because in the book of Daniel it says the Antichrist lives to receive the gold and silver and precious jewels. So there's going to have value. It boils down to this. Everybody who claims to be people of faith, or those who claim to be people of faith, have more faith in the U.S. government and their chicanery and the other governments printing paper than they do in the stuff that God made. So real simple. I'm going to quote a new word for you tonight, okay? The barbarians in the banking world are at the gate, and now I'm calling them, Doug, you'll love this, the Cyberians, okay? Barbarian cyber attackers. They're now called Cyberians in my terminology, just so when I say that, people say, you're just trying to be cute. No, I'm trying to define what's happening. Rome fell when the Goths, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, and everybody else that ended in Goths started attacking the gates, the outposts of Rome. Everything that America stood for is now being nibbled at. Saying that, Ross, what's the typical time when people, get a hold of you and your service is not free? I got to share this with you, ladies and gentlemen. For as much as Ross does, he's very, very reasonable in getting people out of harm's way. But explain just the basics, okay, at what it is that you do for people in order to be able to turn, well, they're still allowed, turn their 401k IRA into a self-directed one and be able to take possession of the physical gold and silver, the land, or whatever they want to buy. And will you explain it and then share how to get a hold of you? Because we're already, only 12 minutes away from the end.
Wow, this time goes by fast when you're really having fun. So, absolutely, Steve. So what we are able to do is bring people who are concerned about their retirement accounts, that they have a 401k, or they have their pension plan or their profit sharing plan in the government. I mean, I have cops, I have policemen, and I have federal workers and teachers. Everybody's coming to me wanting to get their pension plans, which many times are a 457. You might have that, or a 401A, or 403B, or a 401K, your SEP IRA. All of these retirement funds are locked away, and you're told that we'll manage your money for you. We're smarter than you, and we can take care of all this. And you don't need your money until we tell you need it. And so we have the ability to unlock those funds, and whether it's $10,000 or it's $10 million, or $1, it's important to you because that's your money. And so we have two products that allow that to happen, where we can move you from this, the what I call the money matrix, the Wall Street, the matrix, where they control everything, and you're just told to sit down and shut up. It'll get better. You'll still be okay, when in fact you're not going to be okay. And so we have a solo 401k, which if you are self-employed or you want to be self-employed and you have an idea for a small business, or you already are in a small business, we can help you set up a 401k plan that mimics the ability and it expands beyond the ability of the mainstream 401ks that you use in your corporations, or you've been told that that's what exists. And it allows you to keep gold and silver at your home. It allows you to buy raw land. It allows you to buy rental properties that drive a great 12% return on your money every year after year, and it pays off your mortgage for you. You can buy tax liens, foreclosures. You can flip houses. You can buy a 18-wheeler and lease it out. You can buy an airplane and lease it out. All of these things, anything that's in your imagination that doesn't include a collectible item like you'd go to an auction for, you can invest in. That includes storable foods. That includes ammunition. That includes self-defense items. It includes every kind of prepper thing that you can imagine can be purchased through this plan, the Solar 401k. And our sister product, which is called a checkbook IRA, and essentially all that is you transfer your current IRA to a new custodian, and you receive an LLC, and then your plan buys into the LLC as a stockholder, and you are the manager, and you do the same things I was just describing. So if you don't want to be self-employed and you don't want to have any of that having to deal with the 1040 Schedule C, you can get into the checkbook IRA product, or if you want to do something as simple as a Pinterest or an Amazon store or Avon or selling birdhouses out of your garage, all of those things are considered self-employment, and it allows you to unlock the potential of your retirement funds. So you can do all of these alternative investments, but if you want to have some, and I have some clients that like to keep some money in the market, you have that ability to open a brokerage account through your plan in either the checkbook IRA or through your solo 401k. You can do a litany of things that gives you the three legs of your stool: your wealth preservation, your growth engine, and your liquidity. And all of these things, you have to have all of those in order to survive, in order to prosper. And so that's what we provide. And people can call, they can go to the website, survival401k.com. They can go to checkbookira.com. They can go to checkbook401k.com. All of these will lead you to the place where we can help you make a decision what's best for you. We'll listen to your story. We'll listen to your goals, and we'll put you in the best plan that will get you there. These are not free, as Steve said. You have to invest money to make money. So call us. There's 800 numbers on the screen, on the computer, and you can look on the screen. You can call those numbers. You can call me on my cell phone at 210. And I hesitate to give this because my phone's going to burn up, Steve. But I believe in this so strongly.
Do you have another number I can share with you? That's probably not the best number to give out. You think about it. Don't you have another number they can call and leave a message? You can get back to them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Give that number. Yeah, don't give out your cell phone. I can tell you this. I did that one time, and I regretted it the rest of my life. I had to get a new cell phone number because what I had was people wanting to argue, on my cell time, everything else. So please don't do that. That would be unwise. Give out the number that's on your screen, okay?
You can, yes, you can call. You can call series of numbers. You can call 210-388-0777, or you can call. Actually, the best number to call, I'm thinking, because there are people that answer this phone all the time. 1-800-482-2760. So you'll get somebody that will answer your call and actually forward you to one of us that can help you with this. 1-800-482-2760, or go to survival401k.com, and you can actually book an appointment online with that, and we'll get somebody will get to you.
Well, I think that's important. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I can attest to the fact that many, many happy clients, obviously they've called. But Ross, let me share this. They'd better hurry because, again, The thing is that it seems like certain banks, without naming them, are becoming more and more difficult. It's one thing when brokerage firms won't release your funds. It's another thing when the banks won't. And again, for those of you who want silver, you get it. I can get it for you. I cannot get it in the same time period, 3 to 5 days. I can get it within a week to 10 days at market value. If you're looking for price, don't call, because what I have to do is go out on the open market and get it. But I have the ability to do that. Just send me an email, steve777@stevequail.com. steve777@stevequail.com. Put in the subject line metals info, because Ross, I got to tell you, one of our mutual clients who's become a good friend of ours without saying his name, he says, Steve, I don't care about the three legs of the tripod. I'm paraphrasing. He says, everything with me is about capital preservation and survival. The old investment paradigms will not work in a and I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying, but this is a very intelligent man.
Oh, agreed.
Yep, because here's the thing. The standard Bravo Sierra will not be relevant. For instance, rental properties. In a hot market, sure, San Francisco, sure, but what good is that after an earthquake or with no water? Your ability to rent or to get rental income is being decreased by the destruction of the middle class. Typically, outside of Wall Street and the financial centers, the highest proportion of rental income comes from middle class people trying to basically make a living or run their business. So what I'm saying to people right now, it is capital preservation, and I want to make this clear. If the second largest investment bank in the world owns 95% of all commodity contracts, they bought them at all-time low, including gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and the idea is they know what the Chinese are going to do, because let's just say this, they're sharing a nice Chinese meal over the demise of the West. These people have I will say this, and I'll say this not in endorsing prostitution, but a prostitute has more of a code of ethics if they want to stay alive than the average international banker. They will sell anything to anyone. They will sell out anyone at any time. So, Ross, give out your number, again, your phone number and your website, because we're just about out of time, sir. And thanks again for coming on. Man, this has been like a show on rocket charges. This has gone fast. Go ahead, Ross. Thank you.
Sure thing. You can reach us at 1-800-482-2760. Ask for Ross, Steve, or Jordan, and somebody will take care of you right away. Survival401k.com. You can actually schedule an appointment right there on the website, and you can put a contact request in to us, and we will get back to you, or you can email me directly at ross@checkbookira.com or rosspowell@survival401k.com. And I wanted to add one thing, Stephen, and you're dead on. Rental properties are great in a perfect market, and we are in a renter's world, but the first things first, you need to have your food, your water, your weapons, your land, your home. All those things need to be taken care of first before you move your money into something like that. So for those of you that are listening to this that are trying to prepare and buying certain things that get your family ready and your neighbors ready, all of that can be bought through your retirement income, your retirement funds. Just call us and we can tell you how you do it. We actually have lots of contacts in that world that can help you get a good deal on various aspects of that as well. So we can act as your concierge on top of everything else. So give us a call, check out our website, and we're glad to talk you through everything that you need to know. That's about it.
Well, thank you, Ross. And Doug, where are we on time? Should we take a break and then we'll come back with Timothy Alberino?
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Steve, you should. Sounds like you did this for a living once. Or you
pay
did this for a
attention.
living.
I did,
Steve's first rodeo, right?
Yeah, and thank you guys for taking up this rodeo, because this rider is not, going back on the radio by the grace of God on a regular show. I want to thank you, Doug, for allowing Ross to come on. I want to thank you for allowing me to come on, and I want to thank you for allowing Tim to come on tonight. I think we're going to share some mind-blowing stuff with you. And again, once again, Doug, your write-up of the coming 2 hours was absolutely spot on, because we are living in the time of Daniel, the unfolding of the knowledge that will increase. And as God said, there's nothing hidden that's not going to be revealed. And we've got to share tonight is pretty, I believe, mind-blowing. But the timing of the release is you'll see a supernatural signature of the God of heaven warning the world what was in the past lies in their future. So let's go ahead and take the break, and then we'll come back. Is that okay,
right.
Joe?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you, Doug and Steve, for allowing to come on and to educate your listeners, because the times are short, as you say. So thank you.
You're the man, Ross. Seriously, you're the man. I've got a family member listening right now who will be contacting you tomorrow. So God bless you. Thank you for that information and helping so many people. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Take care now.
You too. Folks, that was Ross Powell. His website, survival401k.com. That's survival401k.com. With Steve Quayle on tonight. And coming up, Timothy Alberino. He will be joining us. Timothy's from the Alberino Analysis, and his stuff's also on stevequayle.com. I'm excited and looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. We'll be right back.
Now, again, thank you for all of the new and veteran listeners for checking in with us. Thank you for tuning in to us, and we really appreciate your support, your prayers, and everything that goes along with that. For new listeners, just want to remind everyone, 8 to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. That's our broadcast time. Our home base on the Internet is Hagmann and Hagmann.com. And, folks, while you're at it, please, please, please check out our new YouTube channel. Please go to Hagmann.com and click on the link to the new YouTube channel. JD has just been doing a fantastic job. There you can find visuals as well as audios of our previous shows, and it's he's done a fantastic job, and we thank him for that. Again, Hagmann.com, click on the link to the YouTube channel. Folks, you're listening to hour number 2 of the Hagmann Report on this, the 14th day of July, 2015. Up next, Timothy Alberino of the Alberino Analysis. With us, Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. And I think we have successfully connected. There we go. Okay. Tim, are you with us?
I think so.
All right. Yeah, we're checking our cords, buttons, and lights here. All right, here we go. Go ahead, Steve. We're back up and running. Fire away, Steve.
Okay, well, I always find it interesting because we're talking tonight about technology of the fallen, and Tim, as basically in the film crew, where most people know down in Peru and Bolivia, and we've kind of touched on it, but basically we had to hold up for maybe a couple weeks. In other words, we had hoped to get the DVD out, but through a series of, I would say, divine intervention steps that the Lord had us to take, and basically the steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord, and the direction that we were, I guess you would say, following the path we were put on, we've incorporated some amazing stuff. Now, I want Tim to tell the story of how we got some of the oldest manuscripts from the conquistadors. And as you probably know, Tim speaks Spanish and obviously lived in Peru for a decade, so he's pretty familiar with the landscape and the whole country and its culture. But one of the things that was fascinating is some of the documents that were provided for us were relatively hidden and obscure for 500, 550 years. So, Tim, go ahead and tell the story and take your liberty. When you're worn out or need a breath, give it back to me. But please take your liberty, because I think, Doug, this is one of the most critically important things of the time. As you quoted the book of Daniel, this is the time of the revealing, the secrets that have been hidden, and how they parallel with modern day and the expectation that God is going to deal very sternly with a nation that has forsaken him. It's got its parallels, believe it or not, in Peru, and some of the things that we're talking about. And Tim will be addressing probably in the next hour the difference between the days of Noah and what is called the antediluvian world, the pre-flood world, and the post-diluvian world. So, in essence, we've done our homework. The critics and the complainers, the whiners, the weenies, and the meow men and women should just probably listen and pray, because it's time for everyone to grow up and get with it. You know, you've lost your country, you've lost your ability to even practice your faith, as marginal as it might be or as mighty as it might be. And so tonight, I think we'll show you, again, the root of evil. So go ahead, Tim.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So while we were in Peru on expedition in the city of Puno, which is right by Lake Titicaca, right on the banks of Lake Titicaca, we got in touch with a archaeologist, a very well-known archaeologist named Edmundo de la Vega, who's an expert on the Inca. He's an expert on the Altiplano, the high plain of Peru and Bolivia, mainly in Peru and Bolivia, which encompasses Lake Titicaca, Puno, Tiwanaku. And they put us in, we went to the university, and we wanted to speak with a very good archaeologist, somebody that can that is reputable, somebody that can lead us to certain areas that we wanted to go to, give us some background information, and they directed us to Edmundo. Edmundo himself had never really investigated as an archaeologist the idea of a race of giants having lived in Peru. So he found it really interesting that that's what we were talking about. Obviously, we were doing other things there too, investigating stargates, but one of our primary purposes wherever we go is to investigate giants and look for evidence and so forth. So he was really intrigued by this. He admitted that he himself, as an archaeologist, had never personally found any evidence for giants. But when I questioned him about historic documents relating to giants in Peru, giants in Peru, he said that, yes, he had heard of historic documents relating to giants in Peru, but he had to go and do some research. And I didn't think he was really going to go and do the research, but he did. And a couple of days later, he showed up at our hotel, and he handed me a disc. And basically, this disc, which I reviewed upon returning to Montana, contains something like a dozen chronicles from the 16th century, written by various people, all different people. And most of them were Jesuits or Dominicans, or Augustine monks from the Catholic Church. A couple of them are very well-known historians. Some of these stories are well-known if you're searching for information on giants. Some of the stuff is cited in Steve's book. But there are a few documents that I had never seen. And first of all, we had to translate the documents from Old World Spanish, into New World Spanish, very similar to Old World English versus New World English. And then from English, then I translated them from Spanish into modern Spanish into English, and discovered some pretty astounding things. Basically, the documents, all of the documents he sent me reference giants, specifically in Peru, and some of them reference the same story, some of them reference different stuff. But that's how I came upon those documents, and I agree with Steve. I think it's exceedingly timely. I think that it is a time lock sort of a situation here, and I don't know, Steve, if you want to go into that now or where you want me to go from here.
Continue with the narrative, because I think it's important, that people understand just how this came to be, especially with the documents, the dates, some of the, obviously, chroniclers of the conquistadors, and just lay out the scenario of what the documents on the disc provided. You can take them one by one. Obviously, the giant skull, the rapier, just take it, bam, 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 and then we'll get to the timing of the Supreme Court decision and how the very document dealing with the giants and their sexual practices were dealt with.
Okay. First of all, the context of the 16th century, for those who don't know, in South America, in fact, all over the Americas, was the conquest, the Spanish and Portuguese conquest of the Americas. The conquistadores were obviously the famous situation in Peru with Francisco Pizarro, and he conquered Peru and Bolivia and parts of Ecuador with something like 200 conquistadores. And so that's the context. These documents come from during that period, from right after that, so maybe 10, 15, 20 years after the conquest of Peru had occurred by Pizarro and his men. So Peru was under the viceroy of the Kingdom of Spain, and obviously also the Catholic Church. So that's the time frame, the 16th century. Now, I'll start with some of these documents people have heard of and are well known, but some of them I've done research and I couldn't find any references to them at all outside of what I was given, the original documents. I didn't get the original documents. I got the digital files of the original documents, which are in Lima in the library. So I'll reference this document here. This is a document called the Extirpation of Idolatry in Peru. It was written in 1620 by a man named Pablo Jose Arriaga, who was a Jesuit priest and missionary in Peru. And extirpation of idolatry just means basically the extermination of idolatry. And what was going on after the conquest in Peru was the Catholic Church, together with the Kingdom of Spain, was exterminating the religion of the natives and replacing it with Roman Catholicism. The Inquisition was already established in Peru shortly around this time, either a little bit before, a little bit afterwards. And also, besides the Inquisition, there was a group called the Visitadores, the visitors, which the visitors means the royal inspectors. The Kingdom of Spain had royal inspectors. The state had these inspectors that they sent around to do various things. In the Americas, the inspectors were often working in tandem with the Inquisition. And so you had the inspectors who were representatives of the state, and you had the Inquisition who were representatives of the church, and they were going around together, the Jesuit priests with the inspectors, with the royal inspectors, and they were exterminating all the traces of idol worship and idolatry among the native tribes in Peru after the conquest of the Inca. So this document, The Extirpation of Idolatry in Peru, 1620, by Pablo Jose Arriaga, references a very interesting story here. This Jesuit priest, Arriaga, was going around doing what I just said, and they happened to come upon a town in Peru, and in this town, as they were getting rid of the idols and everything, they were directed to go into a cave. And when they went into this cave, Arriaga, the Jesuit priest, along with the royal inspectors, found a host of dead bodies. They call them dead Gentiles, just basically referring to the natives. Found a host of dead bodies laying around on the floor, and 3 giant bodies with elongated skulls. And from other documents that reference this document, those 3 bodies of those giants were enshrined. And one of the other chroniclers says that they were 6 times the size of normal human beings, or the 6 times the size of the natives. And the natives were somewhere around 5'6", 5'7". The Spanish somewhere around 6 feet tall. So these are normal-sized people. These giants were up to 6 times larger than them, and they were enshrined. And there's this whole story that unfolds. And this, by the way, wasn't just recorded by the Jesuit priest. It was also officially recorded by the royal inspectors who were accompanying him. And so these giant bodies were found. And the interesting thing about this is that they talk about the giants as being the progenitors of the natives that worshiped them. So the natives were worshiping these giants with elongated skulls, and at least the natives believed that they were the progenitors that they were the offspring of those giants. Now, I don't know if the natives had elongated skulls, but certainly the giants did. And the Gentiles, the dead natives that they talk about that were in the cave, were later on in other documents, it's evident that they were human sacrifices to these giants. So this is a very interesting, obviously very interesting story that we came upon in these documents that proves a few things. It proves that the giants, at least some of the giants in Peru, had elongated skulls, which is an important piece of information when considering the elongated skull races that are found not only in Peru but Bolivia and in other parts of the earth. So it's very possible and probably very likely that they came from these giants with elongated skulls, that they were indeed their offspring. So that's one thing. The second thing is that this story confirms that the giants were worshipped, that they were worshipped as gods, and that's evident in other documents as well. But another interesting fact here is that the giants were said to have been turned into mounds, and in Peru, this was the natives' legend, including legends of the Inca themselves, that the giants were turned into stone or the giants were turned into mounds, and that's why they say in these documents, some of these historians and chroniclers, that's why the natives built the monoliths and worshipped the monoliths, because they were an effigy of the giants. And what's really, really provocative to me is that here they're talking about the giants were turned into mounds, and the natives also worshipped the mounds. But what do we know about mounds and giants from the United States, from Sardinia, from all over the world, really, is that oftentimes giants are buried in mounds. So this is sort of an anecdotal piece of information that we came across, that this burying of giants in mounds is a common theme, certainly in the United States, and absolutely in Sardinia, and apparently also in Peru, and therefore probably all over South America. So very likely there are many, many mounds all over the place, South America, North America, Sardinia, and everywhere else, that still to this day have giant bones buried in them. And people just don't know that they're burial mounds. But that little story in and of itself confirmed a whole bunch of details. There's another story in here. I'm flipping through these documents. There's so many of them on my screen.
Well, Tim, explain the skull size and the standard conquistador sword size, and we'll be illustrating this, ladies and gentlemen, in the DVD, because most people are probably not aware of the length of a Spanish cup-hilt rapier. That's actually a sword. So explain that quotation, if you will, or just give it generally, because, again, This was not known. These documents, look, I've been studying giants and writing about them for 25 years. I never found them until Tim got a hold of the disc given to him by an unbelieving scholar. So the point being, please share that, Tim, because it's very critical, and then we'll take into what the giants said about the whole situation of why they were turned into mounds. Now, Jesus said, just as in the days of Noah, and he says, basically, too, in the scripture, Lot's wife turned back and looked at the judgment of God. What happened to her, Tim? She was turned into a pillar of salt. Yeah. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is critical because, again, let's just go there right now. Do you want to read it or do you want me to read it on the native legends and when I say the Incan legends and what they were told and what it was basically throughout South America, because I've got other reports of this, not from the guys that Tim got the source to, but please go into that and explain the timing of the whole thing of God's judgment on the giants and what they were doing. And then I'm going to read, after you're done, I'll read the quote from Diodorus Seleucus, okay?
Okay. Let me start off with what you talked about, the conquistador sword and the head, and then I'll go to the giants that got toasted basically by the angel. So Steve was talking about a head and a conquistador sword. He's referencing a story from these files that talks about a group of conquistadores that came upon a river, and the water washed away part of the bank, and it exposed a gigantic body. Now, there's this here another interesting situation that we're dealing with in these documents is a lot of people have claimed that, the bones that they found were mastodon, they're dragon bones, they're dinosaur bones, and they're not really human bones. But these documents really refute that notion, at least in Peru. Absolutely refute that notion, because in almost every case, the skulls are found with the rest of the bones, and conquistadors were not stupid. They knew the difference between a human skull and an animal skull, you know, a human skull and a horse skull, human skull and a cow skull, certainly a human skull and a dinosaur skull. So they found this body along the bank of a river. The water had washed away the mound or whatever was there, and it was so large that one of the conquistadores stuck their rapiers, their sword, in through the eye socket, and it says that the tip of that sword barely touched the back of the skull of this giant. In other words, it went in through the eye socket and through the head, through the cranial cavity, and barely touched the other end of that skull, the interior of that skull. So I forget how long a blade is on an average rapier, Steve, like 35 inches or something like that.
No, actually, it's 40. Hey, Tim, it's 42 inches.
Yeah, and we, as Steve said, we're going to actually demonstrate that in the documentary so people can see the scale. So we're dealing with not, you know, a 7.5-foot giant or an 8-foot giant. We're dealing with 15-plus foot giants. In some cases in these documents, they're talking about 20 to 30-foot giants, really, really, really huge, human-like beings with human-like skulls. That's what we're dealing with. And according to these chroniclers, some of whom are, and I'll mention some of them a little later on, some of whom are very reputable historians, these giants were there, their bones were there, and it was common knowledge during the conquest of Peru and after the conquest of Peru, and of course the Inca knew all about this. And so there's a very famous story. Steve, I think I'll you want me to nutshell this story, and then are you going to read an excerpt from it?
No, I want you to read the excerpt. Tim, I want you to read the excerpt, and then I'm going to read Diodorus Seleucus on the whole issue that we're making tonight, the timing of this, of the giants being destroyed because of their sodomy is made known to you, hasn't been made known to me. I never knew the situation existed in that because, number one, I don't read Spanish. Number two, the documents couldn't have turned up unless somebody turned them over to us. So that's what I want you to read. Remember the one I just sent you? Yep.
Yes. Okay, so this is a document by a very famous Augustan monk. It was written in 1663. It's called The Moral Chronicle of the Order of St. Augustine in Peru, and this person is considered, Antonio de la Calancha is his name, is considered a reliable source of information. And this is, I'm going to read a portion here. Now, it's a little bit long, so bear with me. I'm going to read this. Speaking of the giants that existed before or after the flood in these native lands, and it's true that after the flood they existed in the New World, and it is said that it was well known that there were giants that came from other parts whose greatly deformed bones are still found to this day near Puerto Viejo. And according to their proportion, they had to be men in stature more than 3 times the size of the Indians today. Some of the documents say 6 size. There's different references. They say that these giants came from over the sea and that they made war with those on the land and that they raised mighty edifices or buildings, some of the stones of which still stand today in testimony of their greatness. They also say that these giants, being terrible sinners practicing incest and sodomy, were burned and consumed with fire that came from heaven. This is the witness of Father Torquemada, and Theodore de Bry also references this, and Theodore de Bry also references the same in his book entitled, and it's a Latin title. Added to this are the known traditions that all of these giants, whose bones are seen to this day in that beautiful place, died in flames, because a young, handsome man, and then in quotations it says, these Indians did not know of the existence of angels, threw lightning down upon them and incinerated all of them, leaving only their bones so that they would remain as a dreadful witness. For other Indians in those provinces, it is common knowledge that because they were sodomites, God turned their remains into large stones that are today dispersed over the land and charred black. And they say that it happened only a short time before the Spanish entered Peru. This news is not new to me, nor do I find it hard that the sodomites would be turned to stone when I see that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt by God because she turned her eyes back to Sodom and was punished for looking back. And thus, it is possible that these punishments also befell these giants because of their sin. So this is a story that is referenced in literally every one of these documents. Now, this particular story was made popular by Cieza de Leon, who was a Spanish traveler traveling through the Americas after the conquest. And Cieza de Leon actually writes in great detail concerning these giants. He talks about how, and so do these other guys reference this, how these giants actually ate 5 times the amount of food as the amount of meat as the regular natives, and then they ate the natives. And they came from over the sea, and they didn't have women. They didn't bring women for some reason with them. And so they tried to make use of the natives' women in sexual terms, but killed them, in the process, obviously. And so they turned to sodomy. They became sodomites, and they were hated. The Indians hated these natives. And I'm paraphrasing all this from Cieza de Leon and all these documents that reference these giants. There's so much information on them. In fact, the houses that the giants built are described in these documents, and some of them were still standing during this time period, during the mid-16th century. These houses were still standing, and they described these houses, what they look like, and they described seeing them standing there still, and everybody knew, it was common knowledge, those are the houses of the giants, of the sodomite giants, who God destroyed with fire and lightning. And so this, again, was very well known. Now, this story is well known. It's on the internet. Even the English translation of Cieza de Leon's version is on the internet, is well known. You can find it, and it's been quoted many times. But what's not well known is that the conquistadors actually proved that it was true. That's what's really astounding, and that nobody mentions, because I've done some research to see if these documents are ever referenced, and I found that some of them are, maybe half of them are, the other half are nowhere to be found, and as far as I can tell, on the internet. And one of these, I'm trying to pull up a document here as I talk. There was a guy named Captain Juan Olmos, who was the lieutenant governor at Puerto Viejo, which is in Santa Elena. By the way, Santa Elena is where these giants landed, these sodomite giants, that's where they landed. Santa Elena was at the time part of the province of Peru, It is now Ecuador. So some people probably have heard this story, and Steve has actually referenced this story in the past. It is now Ecuador. It was Peru. So, and Santa Elena is close to the city of Guayaquil. And you'll see there's a peninsula there if you look on Google Maps. And that's where this occurred. And I say occurred and not allegedly occurred because, as I said, it was proven. Captain Juan Olmos, who was a native of Trujillo, back in the in the mid 16th century, in 1555, somewhere around there. It says, and I'll just read this. This is a document by Agustin de Zarate. Captain Juan Olmos, native of Trujillo, hearing all of these things, conducted an excavation in that valley. Speaking of that valley where the giants were destroyed by God for being sodomites, where he found such gigantic ribs and other bones that if the heads had not been found with them, it would not have been believable that they were human beings. And thus, by his own investigation and seeing the signs of the lightning that punished them, he confirmed what the Indians had said to be true. And he sent throughout the diverse regions of Peru some of the teeth that they found there, each one of which measured 3 fingers in width and 4 in length. So here now we have a historical account of Captain Juan Olmos, who, having heard all these stories about these giants in the province that he was governor of, decided to dig down to either prove the story to be a myth or it's true. He dug down, he found the bones of giants, and not just the bones for all the skeptics. He found the skulls with the bones, and and he would not have believed that they were giants if he had not found the skulls. But because he found the skulls, he could not deny that these were the giants that the natives were talking about. The story was true, and he found evidence that they had been destroyed in the manner that the story says. So then of course he sent the teeth all over the different provinces of Peru to his compadres to confirm that yes, this story that you're hearing about over and over and over is in fact true. So again, a lot of people know about Cieza de Leon's account of these giants, but very few people know that it was confirmed to be true. Steve?
Well, one of the things that I think is critical that people understand, Tim, and you and I both know this, is that as this was made known to you, it was on the same time as the Supreme Court decision and the same issue of the gay, basically triumph over the the covenant promise of God between men and women. Now, I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, I just posted a story on my website that is pretty disheartening, and basically it's talking about so many Christians, so few Lions. One of the things that people don't understand is in the book of Numbers, the land devours its inhabitants. One of the things I wrote on Genesis 6 Giants, my second edition, from page 230, I saw somebody sent me a link where some guy was taking me on over this statement. Well, he didn't do his homework. I did mine. I'm quoting from Diodorus Seleucus. Basically, he's a pretty interesting guy because he knew the history of the world at that time, especially when it came to the Romans' encounter with the Celts, or what were really formerly known as the Sumerians, or the Scythians. Diodorus, Book 5, 32nd verse. Now, I want everyone to understand this. This would be concurrent or even before the time that the giants may have fled to South America, the New World. Although their wives are comely, they have very little to do with them, but rage with lust in outlandish fashion for the embraces of males. And the most astonishing thing of all is that they feel no concern for their proper dignity, but prostitute to others without a qualm the flower of their bodies. Nor do they consider this a disgraceful thing to do, but rather when any one of them is thus approached and refuses the favor offered him, they consider an act of dishonor. That's from my book, Genesis 6 Giants, second edition, page 230, and it's quoting Diodorus Seleucus. Basically, he was a semi-historian poet, but the guy lived around 124 to 170 AD. So what's fascinating is we've got the same reports coming in Numbers. We have it in the Old Testament. We have cannibalism always equated with giants. There's never a case of Shrek being a vegetarian, okay? I told you that in Suetonius' book, The 12 Caesars, that Nero, now this is what's critical, Nero, who was insane, who blamed the Christians for burning down Rome, the fires that he set, had an ogre. He had a giant that was a cannibal, and he used to get his jollies by watching that ogre devour people whole. So the point of Tim's find, I find it interesting. In the mouth of two or three witnesses, let every word be established. This is why I'm making the statement that the gates of hell have opened. Tom Horn's making those statements. Tim is out in the woods around the world looking for the gates, interviewing the people that know about the gates, interview the people that know who comes along when the giants are found. I mean, I've told this story so many times, Tim, of a couple in Pennsylvania that were farmers. They turned over an area in the vicinity of a mound. They found a couple of 12-foot-long skeletons. They made the mistake of telling it to the post office. The post office immediately notified the FBI and someone else. They came in and took the skeletons and basically told the people to shut up or they'd meet an unfortunate end. Now, some people don't believe that. Well, given the fact that every time Tim and the film crew have gone to, it doesn't matter if it's Sardinia, it doesn't matter if it's Peru, it doesn't matter if it's Bolivia, there's always the, quote, unseen hand watching them. agents in the field sitting in restaurants. You'd almost think it was an Indiana Jones movie with the guy in the corner. I asked Tim, I said, Tim, did he have round glasses and a long trench coat? And Tim kind of laughed. But the point being is, without a doubt, the common theme, the common, if you will, interviewees, they all respond the same way. They've watched the giant bones be excavated, and you know what's interesting, Tim? I believe they're letting the older generation die off or hastening their demise in order to be able to spring their if you will, spin on the whole thing. The aliens created us. The aliens are saving us. And for people that don't get it, the Vatican is very serious about that. Tom Horn has documented it in Exo Vaticana. He's done a great job of explaining all his interviews. And again, what we're trying to get people to understand is there truly is nothing new under the sun. And that which has been will be again. Having taken heat for 21 years, Doug, 25 years over this issue, and now, I even posted a story tonight that they're talking about a Jewish, and to my knowledge, this is the first time outside of Barry Kamish talking about Jewish rabbi scholars talking about should we expect giants. Did you guys see that?
I saw the email you sent me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw the email that.
Okay, but evidently, okay. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be inclusive because I don't want to, tie up the time. But I guess it burns in my heart with a lot of passion that I want people to understand this. Okay, so today. Here's what I'm trying to say. This isn't coincidence. This isn't chance. This isn't probability. What's going on here is even the headlines are how do I say this, ringing out with the idea that, people can't get away from the fact that this is all happening now. It's just like the other day. People have always said that, hybrids, chimeras, all this stuff is just, this is just all myth and legend. No, it isn't. The London Daily Mail carried a story about human skeletons being found with hybrid creatures. Did you see that, Doug?
The reference, are you talking about the Daily Mail one, or is this something totally different?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm trying to say, and then I'll give it back to you, Tim. The bottom line is that the headlines now are giving a verification, if you will, or at least announcing two different headlines within 24 hours talking about chimera-like creatures. Those are genetic hybrids, which, by the way, ancient history records that the death of, and we'll get into this, the pre-flood civilizations were destroyed when they started messing with genetic tampering. For the record, I have not been able to separate, Tim, Doug, and Joe, the historic events of genetic tampering following homosexuality. So what I'm saying there is this. When we're seeing the stories that they're now going to make babies without the necessity of a woman and all that stuff, I'm just saying this, forgive me, this is really complex, so I'm trying to be as simplistic as I can. What we're seeing is all hell vomiting the very destructive forces and sciences that result in their total demise. That's where we're at. That's what the days of Noah mean. That's what the days of Lot mean. I've seen people try and embrace the devil's behind and excuse it, and they won't even deal with it. And Jesus said that's what we're dealing with as we approach that time. Go ahead, Tim.
It's amazing to me that the symbol for the gay activists or the gay rights movement was and is the rainbow. And obviously the rainbow was a covenant between God and man that he wouldn't send another flood and destroy the earth. And the reason why that flood came was exactly what Steve said. It had to do with genetics, obviously the fallen angels, the giants, the violence, the wickedness, and definitely the sexual perversion. So here, the very symbolism that the sodomites are marching under, that the homosexuals are marching under, their very banner is giving God the finger. That's literally what it is. And it's shaking their fist at God. He promised he would never destroy the earth with water again, and it's just like Steve said, all hell is being unleashed, it's being loosed, and what's literally happening, the more you look around, the more you see what's going on all over the place, the technology that's coming out, the brutality that we see with ISIS, the sodomite movements all over the earth, taking over the culture, transhumanism. What's happening is we're getting a repeat of the pre-flood world. That's exactly what's happening. It's the days of Noah part 2. And I love all these people who scoff and say, oh, that's not what the days of Noah means. The days of Noah only means that just as the destruction came swiftly on them, they were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage, and then destruction came. And that's all that means. Well, it must just be a coincidence that everything else is happening now too, right? That's just a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that we're tampering with the genetics. It's just a coincidence that we're creating transhumans. It's just a coincidence that the sodomite movements all over the earth are burgeoning. It's just a coincidence that we're finding evidence of giants all over the place. That's just a coincidence, right? I mean, that's the mentality of people. That's not what the days of Noah meant. Well, yes, it is. It has to be, because that's what's happening now. And obviously, we are closer to the coming of Christ than any other generation. That's obvious. And the days are looking more and more like they were before the flood. The problem is so many Christians don't understand what the world before the flood even looked like, because there's been such a great deception, such a deceptive work that's been done in academia, which, by the way, universities were founded by the Church of Rome. The whole idea of universities was founded by the Church of Rome. So the narrative has been controlled from the beginning. Now they don't need to be controlled. The narrative doesn't need to be controlled by Rome anymore, because all the secular humanists are running with it. So now we have the narrative of Darwinism, evolution, and the pre-flood world, or they don't even believe in the flood, most of them. So the prehistoric world, is the way they refer to it, was basically just a time of stupid mammals, and there was nothing else going on this planet, which is such a ridiculous lie. And the only way that people would know that it was a lie is if they, number one, opened their Bibles and read it for what it says, but also if they got out and started to explore to see whether or not that's true. To explore what? To explore the evidence in stone, to explore the stories, the traditions, the histories of the natives. And you find out really, really quick when you do this that the pre-flood world, the world before the great flood of Noah, was a time of incredibly advanced knowledge, technology, yes, but also perversion of every kind. And it was a time of carnage and bloodlust and sexual perversion and sodomy and genetic manipulation. And that is precisely where we are headed. And God has not changed his mind about those things. He hasn't changed his mind. He destroyed everything save 8 people in the first flood, and destruction is again coming. It's the wages that are going to be inevitably paid out for what's going on. And Steve enlightened me to the fact last year that even the chemtrailing has to do with returning to the earth to the state that it was in before the flood. In other words, making the environment appropriate for those creatures and entities that want to return and are returning. Making the environment of this planet more like it was in the pre-flood world. And we have effectively in our universities and in our churches, we have effectively erased the history that is so well documented in not only the scriptures, not only other ancient apocryphal works, not only in every major ancient culture, but also even to this day kept with the smaller cultures like the Hopi Indians and the other Indians around the United States, this idea that there was once what I refer to as an empire of the gods, referring to the fallen angels, their hybrid offspring, and all the perversion that was going on. They don't want us to know about that. And when I say they, it's very interesting. getting back to these documents, it's very interesting that another thing that these documents reveal is the fact that bones were being sent to Lima, the capital of Peru. Lima, it's called the City of Kings, was being sent to Lima in the 16th century. People say, where do the bones go? Well, I can tell you where they went in Peru for sure because it's chronicled here. The bones were sent to Lima, the ones that were of the greatest interest. And do you know where they ended up, at least some of them? In the office of the Secretary of the Inquisition. They ended up in the hands of the Inquisition, in the hands of the Roman Catholic Church. That's where a lot of the bones went. And that's a fact. That's not just a conjecture or a conspiracy. That is a fact, according to these documents, a fact. And the rest of the bones, again, the Catholic Church, along with the state, the Kingdom of Spain, were extirpating, were exterminating idolatry in Peru. Well, guess what? They found out that the Peruvians were worshiping giants. So what do you think they did with the bones? According to the documents, they burned them. They incinerated the bones. So the bones are being burned, and then the bones that aren't being burned, the ones that are of the most interest, are being sent to the Inquisition, and many of them very likely making their way back to Rome. And that is a fact. And that is borne out in these documents. And not only in these documents, it's the very same thing that we found in Sardinia. It seems to me that where the Roman Catholic Church has influence, they're confiscating the bones. Where they don't have as much influence, it's organizations like the Smithsonian confiscating the bones, doing the same thing, destroying them, keeping the ones that are of the greatest value, the most interest to them for whatever reason. And many of those reasons, by the way, why do they keep the bones? Many of those reasons have to do with the occult. They use them. They still worship the giants. They still believe that those are their ancestors. And this is what's really going on behind the scenes. And so you have a whole multitudes of people who scoff and say they think there are giants and giants are coming back. But in reality, the controllers of society behind the scenes are still worshiping those giants, both dead, and I know Steve would agree, alive to this day, worshiping the bones, the remains, and the giants that are in fact still alive. And so this is the reality, and they're doing everything that they can. Again, when I say they, I'm talking about the Luciferian elite, and that encompasses all different kinds of organizations. They are working towards their ultimate goal. What is their ultimate goal? The Golden Age, the reemergence of the Golden Age. The Golden Age Part 2, again, the pre-flood world Part 2. That's their ultimate goal. They want to bring about the Golden Age again. And obviously, in the Greek mythology, the Golden Age was a wonderful time. It's just a lie. It wasn't. It was a horrific time. It was wonderful if you were a fallen angel or you were an offspring of the fallen angel. But if you were a human being of regular size, as Steve always says, you were lunch. You were on the menu. They were devouring human beings. They were slaughtering human beings. They were creating, literally generating, manipulating the genetics and generating monstrous creatures. The Book of Giants references that the 200 watchers that fell in the days of Jared, not only did they have sex with human women and create giants, they chose for themselves 200 species of animals. This is what the Book of Giants says, and copulated with them. And from that union, from that sexual union, or whatever they did, tampering with genetics also, surely they had the technology to do that, they created all kinds of beasts, of monsters. And so it's evident that when the Bible says the days of Noah, it means the times in which we are now living and moving quickly into. And that's what it means. It has to mean that, because that's where we're going. That's what's happening. All these things are coming back. And you have to be absolutely blind as a bat to deny that fact. Steve?
Well, I think again the story that I put up, Tim, is, and Doug and Joe and everyone listening out there, is pretty interesting. It's on Breaking Israeli News. It was headlined today by Adam Berkowitz. Okay, no fairy tale. Will giants return to usher in the Messianic era? To my knowledge, and look, I study this stuff night and day, but stuff escapes me. That and the BBC article about finding basically chimeras, in other words, a half of one animal mated with another, the half of a human mated with a satyr, if you will, or even the unicorns. People have found the unicorns. People say, I don't believe it. Well, of course you don't believe it because you don't do your homework. What we're trying to do is share this. All of this is valid. I have an email, Tim, that typically surfaces probably once a week, Doug, or sooner. Why is this even relevant to our salvation? It's because Jesus told us that just in the days of Noah, people always want more. They always want the latest prophetic word. They always want the latest, if you will, information. My favorite email, which I'll never answer, is this one. Well, I know there are things you hold back, but tell me what you really know. And to that, to me, is like a group of women, and not necessarily women or men, who have nothing more to do with their lives than gossip. And my answer to them publicly, and I won't answer them privately, I'm telling you, I will not answer that question, is what have you done with the knowledge? My other thing is, for those of you who have read my book, you should be the boldest books. After listening to Tim going on the Albarino analysis, if anybody wants I would say this, a graduation level understanding of why everything we're talking about is important, go on my website, click on the Albarino analysis, and Tim has laid it out. Even Tom Horn said that the Pember presentation that Tim did was probably one of the finest things he's ever watched. Now, I'm not praising Tim. I'm just telling you, we do our homework. He has done his homework. I have done my homework. We're doing our homework. We're studying to show ourselves approved unto God, workmen rightly dividing the truth. And see, this is why I've quoted Doug. I've quoted it so many times, Tim. I know over the years listening to me on the radio, you thought, man, is Steve stuck on that scripture? No. It is the most telling and compelling definition of where we're at in history right now. Jesus said, if I've told you earthly things, you believe me not, how can I tell you heavenly things? I made the statement earlier, Doug, they're stealing our future. They're stealing our kids. They're stealing our heritage. They're stealing. We're told in the scripture, the devil comes to what? To rob, kill, steal, and destroy. You know, and so the idea is that pacifism in the pulpit has produced I would say this, the exemplary lamb dinner for all the wolves, not only in the material world, but in the spiritual world. Let me make this clear. Giants did not exist on vegetables, pulse. They did not exist on grapes and good feelings from their fellow giants. When they got through eating humans, they ate each other. Easter Island used to be connected to the mainland in South America. Easter Island was also known for its giant statues called the Moai, M-O-I. One of the Easter Island curses was your grandmother's flesh lies rotting in my teeth. I guess you didn't want to have grandmother over to your house, or grandmother wasn't wanting to go over to Junior's house for dinner. She was it. But they never excavated until recently the Moai statues. And, Tim, some of the chronicles of the Spaniards basically indicate 36-foot giants. Now, that's significant because people can, and we're going to get into this in the next part of the show, well, I don't believe it due to the square root of gravity, blah, 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 blah. Well, gravity changed after the flood. The ice canopy, that the greenhouse effect was in effect. So those things changed. Atmosphere changed. Cosmic radiation bombardment. The best book to read, everybody. It's free. It's free. It's free. The most powerful word in talk radio, free. Download on, you got that, Doug. The download is available. Just type in Donald Patton, P-A-T-T-E-N, Biblical Flood and Ice Epic. There is nobody in history. God bless Donald Patton. I interviewed him, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and that book, I've said it before, had a profound effect on my life. So the point is that the stuff we're talking about, we're not talking about fairy tales. We're not even talking about myths and legends as being nothing more than cute children's bedtime stories, actually more like horror stories. We're talking about the systematic excising of true history from the common theme of history with what I call butchered and bastardized revisionist history, so that when they spring the alien card on us, that the aliens connected us, it's not going to be aliens from the planet, Huron, Zuron, or whatever it is, Pleiades, Antares. It's going to be the guys who are loosed, who were once bound in chains to protect us by the gracious love of God for his creation, being released against his creation almost in total rebellion, except for those who are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what's at stake, ladies and gentlemen. That's why it's important. Please, don't send me your inane emails. I won't answer them, because this is what it's all about. If Jesus said that's what's important, then I said this. Whatever Jesus said is important, I want to deal with. So, Doug, I guess we better go to a break, and when we come back, Tim and I will address the interesting observations that they got from Peru and Bolivia on the fact that there's post-flood architecture and pre-flood architecture, and the distance, and the difference. So let's go ahead and take the break.
Absolutely. A difference with a distinction indeed. Folks, you're listening to a very special July 14th, 2015 episode. Steve Quayle, Tim Alberino. SteveQuayle.com. Tim Alberino from the Alberino Analysis. This is information you're not going to get elsewhere. No. And as Steve said, there's nothing. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour on this Tuesday, July 14th, 2015. Timothy Alberino of the Alberino Analysis and Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com, also the author of Genesis 6 Giants, is with us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, and let us get going in hour 3.
Wow, where did the time go?
I know.
I mean, this is like truth at the speed of light. Genesis 6:4, it's critical that people understand that the giants we're talking about were both before the flood and after the flood. And Genesis 6:4 says this: there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. Now, after that means after the flood. When the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bare children to them, the same became the mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The fascinating thing about my quest for the giants has always been that unless you understand the root of a problem, you can never deal with the fruit of the problem. It's just like sin. So now we're at the point where we're going to talk about in this third hour why it's important to understand the difference between pre-flood architecture and the big giants, the big guys meaning the 36-footers and above, and then the giants even that were in King Og's day, whether they were up to 18 feet. But a lot of things changed after the flood. So, Tim, let's go ahead and take it. I'll just turn it over to you, and you just take it for as long as you want to lay it out so people understand what the find was, why it is so important. And no one ever has dealt with this, although the copycats will now come up with it. But the point being is explain the, if you will, the juxtaposition that you found at the different sites that you went to between the pre-flood architecture and the post-flood architecture. Go ahead and take it as long as you want it.
Well, let me say first that your reference to the giants being bigger before the flood and then smaller after the flood is actually something that the Inca believed, which I found that to be astounding. The Inca believed, and it's recorded a few times, it's mentioned a few times by some of these chroniclers, that the giants after the flood were smaller than 15 foot, basically, is what they were saying when you do the math on it. But that the giants before the flood were much larger. Those are the big, when they found the big bones, when they would talk to the Spanish about giants, it was in the context of pre-flood giants and then also post-flood giants, some of whom were still alive. Now, let me say that again. Some of those giants were still alive, and the Inca referenced them. And one very salient example is from, I think I've got so many documents on my screen here, it's confusing. It's from one of these guys and one of these chroniclers who talks about that during his time while he was in Lima, there was a young man, a mestizo, which is a half-breed between the Spanish and the Indians. During that time, this young man came to Lima. He was almost 9 feet tall. Almost 9 feet tall. That's not gigantism. That is something very interesting going on. He was 18 years old, and he was referenced as a giant. And in connection to the stories of the giants that the Inca told, in other words, they were using him as proof that what the Inca were saying was true. And it wasn't just the Inca; it was the different tribes all throughout Peru and certainly all throughout South America. And again, they worshipped the giants. This was seen as something that was admirable, something that was desirable, was to be from the giants, was to be from this lineage of giants. I can't believe how much information there actually exists from the natives themselves in Peru concerning giants. In fact, the Inca, there's a very famous Inca chronicler, and I say Inca chronicler because he was Inca by blood, but he was also what's the word, Spaniardized or he became a European Inca basically, and his name was Juan de Santa Cruz was his Christian name, and then he has this long Inca name which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. But he, in his chronicles, he wrote some chronicles called Ancient Accounts from the Kingdom of Peru. It was written in 1613, and he mentions battles that had giants in them. And he mentions in one, and in the and I'm reading from the document, and in the aforementioned battle, they say that 2 giants were killed. Those bones are presently in Chacaro, set upon pedestals. So, in other words, the giants fought each other or were fighting on the same side. They died, and they enshrined their bones, which seems to be a common situation with the natives when dealing with giants. So we're talking about the Inca referencing pre-flood giants, referencing post-flood giants, some of which were still alive. So when we were in Tiwanaku, obviously we were, again, always looking for evidence of giants everywhere we go. But I didn't even realize when I was actually there in Bolivia, because I hadn't reviewed these documents yet, because we were just, everything was fast and furious when we were in Peru, that Tiwanaku itself, and for those who don't know where Tiwanaku is, it's right across the Peruvian-Bolivian border in Bolivia. It's about a 45-minute drive from the Peruvian border. It's in northern Bolivia in the Altiplano, and it is one of the most incredible megalithic, I would say one of the most enigmatic megalithic sites, archaeological sites on the planet. And there's a lot of confusion surrounding Tiwanaku because it's known by different names. The indigenous name is Tiwanaku. The Spanish name is Tiahuanaco. They are referring to the same place. Within Tiwanaku is Pumapunku. So I had no idea while I was there. I suspected it, of course, but I didn't know that giant bones, not just giant bones, I shouldn't say just giant bones because people think mastodon dinosaur, giant skeletons, entire skeletons with the head still connected of human beings, of giants, were dug up right there in Tiwanaku. And this is confirmed by some of these guys who were there, who were in Tiwanaku, who lived there for a while, who studied the ruins, in the 16th century. This isn't hearsay. This is right from these guys who knew what was there, knew what had been dug up, and it was common knowledge that giants were found there, and also the elongated skull people of normal stature. So isn't that interesting? Here again we have giants and we have these elongated skull people. I don't know if the giants themselves had elongated skulls. I can't remember if they referenced that specifically to Tiwanaku, but it's amazing to me that all these programs out there that have done documentaries and television shows on Tiwanaku, none of them have ever mentioned the fact that giants were dug up there. I mean, that would, because that doesn't really fit into their ancient alien narrative. Giants are caused, maybe like an 8-foot giant or a 9-foot giant. They'll say that those could have been the Nordics from the Pleiades star system. But what do you do with a 20-foot giant? What do you do with a 30-foot giant? You're dealing with something very from the whole alien scenario, which I think is tied in, but not in the way they think. You're dealing with something very distinct. You're dealing with these incredibly huge humanoid entities, and they were found buried beneath the soil at Tiwanaku. And not only were giants discovered, the corpses. In some cases, it seems like the documents are referencing corpses as opposed to skeletons. In other words, mummified corpses, and they were very clearly humanoid with heads and connected to their shoulders. I'm not talking about mastodons. And also the Inca, as well as the Spanish chroniclers, mainly the Jesuits and the different some of the other guys in the different orders, the other Roman Catholic orders. It was common knowledge to them, and I was surprised to find this too. It was common knowledge to the Inca, for example, that the Pumapunku ruins and much of what used to be at Tiwanaku, and I say used to be at Tiwanaku because much of what you see at Tiwanaku today is a fabrication, literally in every sense of the word, a fabrication. The government, it's been long since plundered. The megalithic blocks, the Bolivian government used to use the ruins at Tiwanaku as a target range, and so they blew it to pieces, basically, a lot of it. And again, you hardly ever hear anybody talk about this kind of stuff. And a lot of the megalithic blocks, not the big ones, the smaller ones, have been carried away over the centuries and have been long since incorporated into walls and roads by the villagers in the surrounding area. So what the government did was they reconstructed, and I say fabricated, because they didn't even base their reconstruction really on archaeological evidence. They just reconstructed this thing, some of the stuff that's standing there, not the Pumapunku stuff. They didn't even try to reconstruct Pumapunku. And when you watch our documentary, you'll see why. Very different. They reconstructed some of the other stuff based on guesswork, basically. And nobody factors in. Nobody factors in. I shouldn't say nobody. Obviously, we do, and some other researchers have, like Panansky, the famous Arthur Panansky, who was doing research there in the early 19th century. I should say the early 20th century. He knew that giant bones had been discovered there, and he himself had discovered elongated skulls right there. So there's all this history that has been deliberately, as I said earlier, erased. You can talk about Tiwanaku, you can talk about, for example, the Temple of Kalasasaya, the pyramids there, but you can't talk about it in its real context. What is its real context? Pre-flood, giants, elongated skulls. That's the real context, not aliens or some weird concocted thing that there's really no evidence for. But what there is evidence for, again, giants, elongated skulls, pre-flood, nobody talks about. And it's astounding that people ignore what's right in front of their faces, and they either buy into the BS that the nationalistic regime forces on people there, that being the regime of Evo Morales, or they buy into the ancient alien stuff, neither of which have any evidence to prove their claims, or very scant evidence, when right in front of your eyes is all kinds of evidence, world, the whole Pumapunku, the whole Tiahuanaco area, the whole valley, the whole Altiplano, in fact, was flooded. And that's a fact because they found seashells and they found the residues of tropical plants. The whole Altiplano was most likely at one time at sea level. And through some kind of cataclysm, probably the flood of Noah, most likely the flood of Noah, was elevated, was lifted up. The entire the surface area of the Altiplano was lifted up together like one block of land to the altitude that it's presently at, which is over 13,000 feet. And because it's over 13,000 feet, there's no way that it could have supported the massive civilization that obviously existed there at one time. So we've got seashells, we've got elongated skulls, we've got bones of giants, we've got technology at Pumapunku, the likes of which no archaeologist could ever even begin to explain how they were able to do the things that they did. And there's all these internet sites out there that are debunking ancient aliens, and in many respects rightfully so, but also trying to debunk this notion that you needed advanced technology to build, for example, Pumapunku. You know what? You needed advanced technology to build Pumapunku. There's no question about it. When you stand there, when you touch those blocks, again, you'll see this in the documentary, when you feel the vitrified surfaces of these stones and you look at the angles, and then you take into account the fact that they were submerged for who knows how long, probably centuries underwater. And again, that is a proven fact. The only thing that's disputed is whether it was a local flood of Lake Titicaca or if it was a larger flood. Well, we know it was the larger flood. It was the flood of Noah. In fact, they have recently discovered ruins that are very similar very similar to the ruins that you find at Tiahuanaco, in other words, at Pumapunku, at the bottom of Lake Titicaca. So obviously Lake Titicaca wasn't always there. So it wasn't Lake Titicaca that overflowed. Lake Titicaca is the residue of the ocean. It's the residue, what was left over when that whole area was flooded in the Great Flood of Noah. And again, that was the pre-flood world. That's what is called the antediluvian. Antediluvian, by the way, literally means before the flood. This is a word that is in our vernacular. It is a scientific phrase, and it means exactly what so many of these quote-unquote scientists, anthropologists, historians, archaeologists try to deny the fact that there was a worldwide flood. And it's actually quite ridiculous that anybody would ever try to deny that fact, seeing as seashells and tropical plants are found on top of Mount Everest, the residues, the petrified remains, not only the Altiplano, but on top of all the high mountain ranges on this planet. The entire Earth was obviously submerged in a flood. That's a given. And what's also a given is that there were massive giants. There were different races that were not fully human. That is all proven. It really is proven. It's proven far more to such a greater to such a tremendously greater extent than the theory of evolution, for example. I mean, compared to the theory of evolution, the proof of giants, the proof of a pre-flood world, the proof of advanced technology in the ancient world, I mean, it just far surpasses it. It's not even comparable. The scant evidence that there is for evolution that's being taught as a solid fact and shoved down everybody's throats, and yet here they're absolutely ignoring this incredible reality of a pre-flood advanced world. And of course, we're talking about the world that God himself destroyed. He decimated it. And by the way, a lot of people forget that in the book of Enoch, I call this an angelic hazmat operation. There is what appears to have been an angelic hazmat operation that took place after the flood or during the flood, where the angels were told to basically eradicate the knowledge of the fallen angels, of the Watchers, destroy the evidence, get rid of it, bury it. And why? So that we would not know of that time? No, of course not. Noah and his sons were very much aware of the world that they just escaped. And believe me, they told everybody about it. The stories were passed down. It was supposed to be passed down. It was exemplified as something that the human race was not to do again, because obviously it angered God. But it was this hazmat operation in the book of Enoch was done so that the knowledge, the forbidden knowledge, would not be recovered. That's what that was about. Bury the knowledge, because it corrupted the human race. And as I was saying earlier, we are literally unearthing the knowledge of the Watchers. We are unearthing the forbidden knowledge of the fallen angels that corrupted the earth. And we're doing it at an incredible pace. And that is, as Steve has said many, many times, that is the prime objective of the secret societies and of many of the agencies working in the governments of the world, including the United States, is to recover the knowledge, to recover the technology of the empire of the gods. And again, when I say the empire of the gods, I'm talking about what the whole ancient world refers to as the time of the gods, when the gods came down, mated with human women, and their offspring, their giant hybrid offspring, were the potentates, the rulers of the earth. And in truth, again, they refer to that as the Golden Age. We know that as an age of incredible darkness, the days of Noah, more specifically, the days of Enoch. And so this is obviously this is what we are documenting in our documentary film, Technology of the Watchers. And before I forget, go to visit the website, our website for the series. TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. TrueLegendsTheSeries.com is the website for our documentary, and I've just started to do some updates. I'm going to be updating it frequently now. I didn't have the time before. Now I do, and so I'm updating it frequently. I'm going to be letting people know where we are in the editing process, when they should expect the documentary to come out. But all these documents that we're talking about today are going to be cited. Steve and I are going to talk about them, explain them in more detail. We're going to show you what we saw. You're going to see the ruins at Tiwanaku and at other places in Peru to an extent that a lot of these other TV shows and documentaries don't show you. I find it amazing that they spend all this money, and for example, let's just use Ancient Aliens for an example. They spend all this money to send these guys to Tiwanaku, and they barely show you any of the ruins. And they barely talk about the true history of the place or mention what the Inca believed or what the conquistadors believed or what the Jesuit priests who first came upon those ruins believed. And the Jesuit priests who came upon those ruins, and not just the Jesuit priests, the explorers, the chroniclers, every one of them that I have read so far that came upon the ruins of Tiwanaku says the same thing or infer the same thing, and that is this. This was built before the flood of Noah. They say it in concert with the Inca, in concert with the natives that lived around the area. This was built, and many of them say, by a race of giants before the flood of Noah. That is the true history. That's what our kids should be learning in school. That is the fact. That's what everybody knew. That was the common knowledge, the common narrative that everybody knew. They knew this. They knew the names of the pre-flood entities. They knew the histories before the Tower of Babel, when they were all dispersed and their languages were changed and all the names got scrambled and all the dates and the events got scrambled simply because the languages were scrambled. God confused the languages. They all moved away from each other, created their own cultures, formed their own myths from what they could remember, the fragments that they could remember from the pre-flood world. That's what the myths are built around. But you can be assured that before the Tower of Babel, there was a universal knowledge, not just a knowledge, but like I said before, the pre-flood world was an object lesson. Don't do this again. And folks, we're doing it again. As in the days of Noah, we are doing it again right now, exactly what the flood and the pre-flood world are supposed to exemplify and are supposed to represent as a warning. Steve, Doug, Joe?
Yeah, Steve, I don't think I've ever heard an explanation so precise, so spot on, so relevant to today than what Tim has said this hour. My goodness. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, first of all, it's the appropriate time. Second of all, people now have ears to hear. They have eyes to see, and by the grace of God, I believe that, it's time for those things to happen. I want to draw everyone's attention to my book, Xenogenesis. I was provided with the document. Doug, you wrote part of it, the box of chocolates, the introduction, but in the rainbow was God's covenant. This is a sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. The very fact that there are 6 colors in the rainbow that flashed upon the White House and around the world should tell you something. God's 7. I'm going to read this because I said this, Doug, the box of chocolates, and Will B is a friend of mine. He gave me permission to quote Mr. Langley, high-ranking CIA guy who called Will to his bedside before he died and told him some, I believe, the most earth-shattering information, and I use that word in its fullest context that I've ever read. This is critical for you all to understand. And tonight I would say this, if you want to get it, because sooner or later you're going to get it, as a multi-star general in special operations said to me, sooner or later you will get it. Sooner or later everybody gets it. For most it will be too late. My prayer tonight is by the entrance of knowledge, by the entrance of wisdom, we're seeing the very images of Noah's flood. We're seeing and hearing of the destruction of the pre-flood giants and the post-flood giants. Now listen to this, my friend's account. This is in my book, Xenogenesis. I'm going to read it in its entirety. Those of you who have it, you might want to mark these pages down. One day out of the blue, Langley called me. He wanted to know if I was aware of chemtrails. His question caught me by surprise, as I had been aware of the unusual spraying of these man-made contrails for some time, but had never brought the subject up to him. Now listen to this. They are trying to remove the Alpha and the Omega, he told me. He told me that he had been involved during Vietnam War with the Blazer, B-L-A-Z-E-R project. Blazer had several compartments, some relating to weather modification over Vietnam, some with secure and encrypted communications, some with weapons technology, and some focus on experimental and rather dark and occult research. He told me that most of the Blazer work was cutting edge but pretty much standard operational use of frequencies and materials to encrypt messages and direct weather patterns. He was concerned, though, with the ramifications of the darker aspects of Blazer, primarily the attempt to tap into and manipulate the other dimensions or the spiritual realm. He described it like this. Think of a rainbow, all of the colors flowing together like a river. Now envision a river, all of that power being channeled towards the sea. The river has a path and a direction, and is held in check by the banks of the river. Imagine that the far bank is Alpha and the near bank is Omega. If either bank is overcome, the result is chaos, a flood. So the Alpha and the Omega, the banks, hold the power of the river in check. You can call it the river of life. I added that. I understand this concept. Now imagine, he continued, that the colors of the rainbow are different frequencies of energy, all being held in check by banks that are the Alpha and Omega frequencies. Remember, Jesus Christ himself is the Alpha and the Omega. In Colossians 1:16 and 17, I'm giving you the Bible verses. All things that are held together were created for him, in him, by him, and for him, and it's all held together by the word of his power. Okay. Banks, the two banks of the river are the Alpha and Omega frequencies. Life is orderly as long as these two frequencies are there and doing what they do. We often don't see rainbows, but God created the rainbow as a visible sign to us that he's in control of all of the forces of nature and the spirit on this planet. We appreciate it when we see a rainbow. It is somehow a spiritual comfort to us. All is well, so to speak. Now his tone became more serious and ominous. What they are working on, and it's very black ops, is a way to remove the Alpha and the Omega, the banks that hold all of this in check. This would allow the intermingling of forces that are all now kept separate from one another, forces that were not intended to be together, and operating on the same dimensional plane of existence, it will be unleashing of chaos unto the earth. Now, Mr. Langley, again, CIA top guy, dying deathbed conversion and sharing with my friend Will. Consider the Alpha and the Omega to be the God force in the universe. When you think about it, God had been a real presence upon the earth. I mean that he literally walked with man upon the earth at the time of creation for some time after. Adam and his family saw God and interacted with him on a daily basis until their fall. Later, Enoch had a face-to-face knowledge of God and was taken by him after imparting godly wisdom, to Enoch, and he was instructed to share with his descendants. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, there's either 360 or 365 books of Enoch, of everything you know, all the mysteries of the universe, and guess who controls those? We only have fragments of two different versions and just partial versions of Enoch, but that's neither here nor there. Then God removed himself from direct contact with men. He still was involved with mankind, but not directly as we would consider it. He chose to interact with us in an unseen manner, except in those rare cases. Moses on the mountaintop and in the form of the Holy Spirit, depending upon Jesus in the form of a dove, when he wanted to remove all doubt of who he was. Sin had entered in with the act of Adam and Eve, allowing themselves to be deceived and turning against the will of God in the Garden of Eden. In effect, and on a spiritual level, they had stepped outside the boundaries that God had set for them. The result was chaos. Mr. Langley now had my full attention. And by the way, I know this person, Doug. I know this person, Joe, and I know this person, Tim. I have the highest respect for him, and all I can say is I can't say any more than that, but I have the highest respect for him, okay? When you view this in the context of science or alchemy, everything that came afterwards is understandable. Nimrod chose to allow himself to be influenced by and fully embraced by the dark forces. This led to his determination to build the Tower of Babel. This was the third attempt by dark forces or fallen angels to get humans to cooperate with them in their attempt to return to their former abode. There were giants in those days and after those days. Heaven, and to finish their attempting at overthrowing God from his throne. The first attempt was in Eden. The second was in convincing Enoch to plead their case before God. The interim period after that was a time before the flood when the giants were born. The attempt was made to subdue the earth by force, to take the world that God had created for man. At Babel, the attempt to convince mankind to assist them in reasoning with God on their behalf was abandoned. The new strategy was to create a means to rise up and assault the gates of heaven. This required time and human technology. The fallen ones could not return to heaven on their own. They were banished in order to make their assault. They needed the willing participation of humans. Now it gets interesting. The decision by Nimrod to embrace the dark forces led his thoughts to build the Tower of Babel, or Babel. Note that God took notice of this building project and decided to confuse the language of men and tear it down, the tower. If we do not do this, then nothing will be kept from them of what they conceive. Think about how unusual a thing that statement is. God is God. He can do whatever he wants, but the building of this tower was of concern to him. This is a striking statement. The tower represented something unique, a willing participation between fallen angels and God's creation for his pleasure. In agreement to assault the gates of heaven, God knew that he had a plan for the salvation of mankind, Jesus. Satan also knew this, and the satanic plan was to somehow unite willing humans with fallen angels in an attempt to return home. Now here it is. Towers, pyramids, mountains, all places of dark worship stood as reminders to humans that they were being directed to look upwards to the heavens. Patiently, these dark forces waited, suggesting to men new ideas and inventions, new technologies and innovations, the discovery of new materials and concepts that would eventually lead to today's information technology revolution, which is nothing more than a return to the Tower of Babel. Now, here's the thing. Our conversation went on for hours. If this wasn't so important, Doug, I wouldn't be reading the whole thing. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you ask me, tell me the most important thing, Steve Quayle, not the most hidden, not the most interesting. Well, this is probably the most interesting, but the most arcane. This is the most specific, amazing, timed release of information that I personally know. In other words, this blows my mind. Our conversation went on for hours that day and many other hours and many other days. The basic overview is this. Mankind has come to the point in history where he is technologically able to do most anything that he conceives of. With the explosion of the Internet and modes of travel, communications, breakthroughs, and innovations, all guided in some manner by dark forces, we stand at that place in time when the greater master plan of dark forces can be realized and acted upon. Most humans are not aware that the work has this greater purpose, and they willingly go about their research with blinders on. So I just want to finish this up. Our reward for this work is the praise of man, financial gain, and a higher standard of living, which causes us to seek after this type of gain. The result being our focus on the things of man rather than the things of God. As to the removal of the Alpha and Omega, Mr. Langley said, and he was convinced that the final chapter is about to be revealed. It has already been written in the book of Revelation that we are on the verge of witnessing the restraining walls between dimensions, the restraining power of the Holy Spirit being removed. This will not be accomplished by an assault on heaven, but by God's purposeful removal of the restraining spirit from the world. At this time, humans will have made a conscious choice as to which side they will serve, God or darkness. There will be a winnowing period, that's where we are right now, in which head knowledge of God and His purpose will be challenged as opposed to heart knowledge by an unimaginable time, here you go everybody, of violence and lawlessness. Violence and lawlessness. One of the names for the Antichrist is the man of lawlessness. Christians will not escape this time. In fact, it is for this very reason the refining of mankind that this short time of chaos will be allowed. But the battle is already won. Here's the great news. The battle is already won. The purpose of this time of trouble is to refine and purge out the impurities of mankind so that the perfect can come. In the meantime, we go about our lives in darkness, not seeing what is right in front of us unless we consciously choose to do so. Jesus told us, I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Now, I want to share this, Doug, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tim, because why this is relevant, why this relates to Tim, why this relates to the study. It is God's defined time, a specific time to reveal the truth, because the Bible says, surely the Lord God will do nothing except He reveals His secrets to His servants the prophets. Tim and I do not claim to be prophets, but we are the servants of the Most High God, as you and Joe are. And the testimony of Jesus, the spirit of prophecy. This thing in my book, Xenogenesis, ladies and gentlemen, I think it starts at page 241 and goes through 250, and the introduction that Doug wrote, Doug Hagman, who you're hearing in the background, who is his show that so graciously yields to us, is responsible for writing. The point being is it's the most significant and important thing. That's why the gay agenda. That's why we're making a big deal about the time that Tim was given the disc, and that the deciphering of the disc was specifically related to the giants and their sodomite practices being destroyed from an angel from heaven. By the way, there are other accounts, Tim and Doug, where the people literally said, the people who put it into modern context, who were genuinely born again in the 1700s, saying God sent His angel from heaven and smote them with lightning from heaven, and they even claimed that the lightning signs, if you've ever seen lightning strike a mountain, you can see it in the Grand Tetons and some of the striations and patterns or mountains, that there's a strict vertical cut, if you will, into the mountains. The point being is this is why the rainbow has been taken back. The rainbow is a symbol that all God's barriers are down. Does that come across, Doug, loud and clear, Joe and Tim? Does that come across?
Man, I'll tell you something. You have that's precise, specific, and much needed for people to hear.
I would say, Tim, I'll give it right back to you. I would say that the most important thing I've ever written in my life is Genesis 6 Giants, but that was the left hand, if you will. The right hand is Xenogenesis. Notice they both have the word Genesis. One is the Old Age. I want to correct something. It was Diodorus Siculus, and he lived between 30 and 90. I said I was quoting some other birthday. You know, I got these in my head. I apologize. But I was quoting Apuleius, Apuleius. Why that's critical. Do you know what that antiquity absolutely traces to the downfall of Rome? And some of the issues were this, that the gay agenda especially on Apuleius' time, and I'll post a link to it. But the point is that it was the effemination of men who called each other women that sought young boys to have sex with to increase their, if you will, powers. And it was the Romans, even as perverted as they were, and you can read that in Romans chapter 1 in the book of Romans, the New Testament, even they were disgusted by the fact that these were men who dressed like women, put on makeup like women. Now, does that sound like someone very famous just happened? Notice the timing of Caitlin's outing. Notice the timing of the ruling of the Supreme Court. Notice the timing of Tim Alberino's quest into South America being deciphered in the United States. Notice all the information you got about a rainbow. And ladies and gentlemen, there is no way to make it clear. The gates of hell are open. What we are writing about, what we're producing the video about, it will be a step-by-step. I think it is so timely, and by the grace of God, God has provided us the right people with the right testimonies at the right place at the right time. All hail the power of Jesus' name. Go ahead, Tim.
I think it's interesting, too, that recently, I don't remember how recently, but sometime in modern history here, and certainly in my generation, it was discovered, it might even have been just in the last decade, you probably know, Steve, it was discovered that Pompeii was basically the capital of sexual perversion and fornication and all manner of sexual perversion and homosexuality, and they've been able to confirm this unequivocally. And it was such a scandalous place. I mean, there's pornographic paintings all over the walls that they've discovered. And Pompeii, is it a coincidence that Pompeii was literally buried under the molten lava of the volcano that erupted in its vicinity? I mean, it's what's really frightening is that there's a couple of things that demand a response from God. And this is apparent in the Bible, that elicit a response from God, and it's a swift response, and it's a terrible response in terms of its ferocity and the destruction that follows. And the two things that you see over and over and over are the sacrificing of children, i.e. abortion in our modern vernacular, and homosexuality and the pervasiveness of homosexuality. Those are two things that always provoke a response, and those are the two things that basically our cup, not only ours in the United States, but many different nations, certainly in different nations in Europe, is overflowing at this point with those two abominations. And I agree with Steve. You know, it literally was. It might even have been on the very same day, Steve, that I was discovering this, verifying information about that story of the Sodomite giants that were destroyed in the lightning and in the brimstone, is what some of them say. It might have even been the very same day that that homosexual marriage was legalized in the United States, and there are so many examples of the wrath of God coming swiftly after a nation's cup begins to overflow with those two particular abominations, among others. But those two particular abominations seem to be the most provocative in terms of provoking God to anger. There are, of course, many others, and of course, those are rooted in pride, which is the ultimate downfall of all those, which is the ultimate source of all perversion. So, again, it's a frightening thought to see how far we've come. I mean, we know that Rome was excessively debauched before its downfall. Obviously, Babylon, obviously Egypt, these civilizations, they get to a point where they become so debauched that the only recourse is to level them, to destroy them. That's part of the plan. The enemy always does that in Scripture, in the context of Scripture. The way that the devil would most frequently attack Israel wasn't to come himself because God was protecting Israel. It was to get the Hebrews to sin against God, to commit such profane abominations that it provoked God to anger. That was the agenda. That was the way that the devil would operate against Israel. And that is still the MO, is to get nations and peoples to get to such to come to such a debauched state where a response must come from heaven. And you can imagine, these giants, going back to the story of these giants that landed on the coast of Santa Elena in what is now the peninsula there in Ecuador. These guys were so wicked, so vile. If you want to get a sampling, just a sampling, and this was post-flood, a sampling of the wickedness that Steve has been talking about for years and years and years and years that's coming, that the evil that's erupting, the gates of hell, a sampling is in the documents here that we have of the perversion of these giants and the bloodlust of these giants. I mean, they were literally just devouring the natives, raping their women to death, obviously, being humongous giants. They walked around naked. I mean, there's so much detail in these documents about what they ate, about the nets they made. They caught sharks and other large fish off the coast, how they built their houses, and how they were decimated. And it does say, and I read it, and it does say to remind everyone that even the natives, this is the story of the natives, not of the Jesuit priests, of the natives, that a young man, a young handsome man, an angel, appeared in the sky and began to throw lightning down on these giants. And that has a biblical context. There was the story of David where he wasn't supposed to take the census. The devil enticed him to take the census. And as a result, God gave him an option. I have to judge you for this. And the people, A, you let me judge you or directly, or B, I let your enemies come. And, of course, David chose wisely that God would judge him because he knew that God would have mercy. He knew he could solicit God's mercy, which is exactly what he did, but he couldn't solicit the mercy of his enemies. They would be merciless. So, long story short, an angel appears, I think it was over Jerusalem, somewhere in Israel, appears in the sky and has a sword and begins to cut people down. And that is, again, that's the context of what was going on with these giants. An angel appeared in the sky and began to rain down lightning and fire on these guys. And let me remind everybody, this is not some legend. According to the Chronicles, and these are the sorts of chronicles that we base so much of what we think we know about the events of Rome, the historical accounts of this nation and that nation and this famous battle. These documents are on the same level of those kinds of things. These were chroniclers, and in many cases, those chroniclers were chroniclers of Rome, of the Catholic Church. And these guys are telling us that this was a pervasive, this was a ubiquitous knowledge, and then it was confirmed. They were able to confirm it. They found the bones, and somehow they were able to verify that those bones were charred, that those giants indeed had been destroyed in the fashion that the Indians had been telling them. And I just wanted to recap that story and stress the fact again that this is not a legend. This is a fact. And it is indeed amazing that it's surfaced at this point in time. And I'll kick it back to you guys for the last 5 minutes.
Tim, thank you very much. Steve, go ahead. I just find this so fascinating. We could probably do another 3 hours, but my goodness, you talk about information overload. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, Doug, all we're giving everybody tonight is the first sentence in the first paragraph. I think that as the Lord leads, again, I say this, some people think I'm kidding. I am believing for a 6-hour show. The reason we can't split it up is because people, lose their train of thought. And, that might be the most fascinating 6 hours, especially of Tim Tom Horn and I do it. The reason I say that is, look, I don't think we're better than anybody. Just to, again, calm the critics that are probably having nervous breakdowns right now. A man has nothing except to receive it from above. The grace that God has shown to Tom Horn, the grace that God has shown to Tim, and to me, he's brought us all together. The Lord brought Tim to me because I was looking for someone that could basically step into my shoes and I could duplicate my effort. Obviously, to doing this work, it's impossible. It would have been impossible for me to do it. It would have been impossible for Tom. And Tom said, if it hadn't been for you, Steve, I wouldn't even gone into this. So all I'm saying is this. I say that to shut the mouths of critics, okay? Those of you that have never battled the powers of darkness won't understand why I just said that. But when you've got the headlines, let me say this. Tonight we're talking about Celts. We're talking about, they were called Sumerians. We're talking about the Celtic giants. We're talking about the homosexuals. You want to know there was a female giant. Her name was Boudica. She just wiped out a lot of Romans until she was killed. But what's the shot of this, Doug, that seriously, on July 13th, and what's today, the 14th? One day before I'm going on your show, you see, I'm not trying to make anything fit, but when everything fits, the puzzle is going together as I believe the incredible knowledge and love of God for his creation. Ancient monster graveyard unearthed. Celts create, or Celts, some people pronounce it Celts, create hideous beasts using dead animal parts as offerings to the gods. They're claiming that they took the skeleton of one animal, put it together with the other, and that's what they put these things together. I don't buy that, because in the days of the British Isles and the giants, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump under the candlestick, I fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, or the famous giant Finn McCoo, an Irish giant, a little bird telling me, the little bird told me so. That comes from a giant story. So all the idioms, colloquialisms, and different words that have passed into our vernacular come from this time period. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I want to share this. I believe, and I'm serious about this, I believe the time is so short. I can't say when the giants will appear. I know they already exist. I know they're alive on the planet. I know there are special teams that at a certain time were designated to go and hunt those things down before they hunted us down, but that's no longer in play, simply because God has withdrawn his hand from this country. But I would say this, Genesis 6 Giants, the second edition, is the most important book I've ever written to lay it out in a historical foundation. Xenogenesis with the whole Langley, Mr. Langley, even Will, my friend, said the children of Mr. Langley didn't even know what their dad did, but he sent me an email saying they listened to the program and they thanked me for honoring their father. I wish I could have been by Will's side. It wasn't meant to be, but God bless you, Will, for your faithfulness. May the God of heaven reward you in every way. But please, ladies and gentlemen, order those two books. They're that critical. It's critical for you to understand that knowledge is power. The whole techno-decadent society is based around knowledge. Why do you think all of the cyber attacks that Ross Powell and I talked to, what do you think about all the databases being violated? It's all knowledge. God wants you armed with knowledge, therefore you won't be taken in fear and despair when this stuff starts to appear. And by the way, Doug, based on my emails, Christians are having more supernatural evil encounters, and they said, what's happening? This has never happened to me before in my entire life. My answer to all of you who are experiencing this, there's power in the blood of Jesus. Resist the devil, he must flee, and understand. Now you know what the gates of hell are opening are all about, but Jesus promised us this, that they would not prevail against his body of believers, nor would they prevail against the believers who are told there's power in the name and through the blood of Jesus Christ. Ladies and gentlemen, you can go on my website, stevequayle.com, order the book, Genesis 6 Giants, Volume 2. Tim and I will be announcing on the website daily, or at least every other couple days, our progress, and we commit you into the hands of the living God, who is the most loving, amazing, wonderful, spectacular, a Heavenly Father who has only your best interests at heart. Turn to Jesus while there's still time, because He'll never forsake you or leave you. Doug, God bless you. Tim, thanks so much. You did an amazing job. Joe, good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you both. Gentlemen, God bless. We're out of time. Folks, until tomorrow, stay safe. God bless. Good night. And we're out of time. I can't believe it. We're out of time.
Until tomorrow, stay safe. God bless.
Don't miss it.
Have a good night, everyone.